So it is not often, as a matter of fact, it's rare probably, that I'm like totally self-conscious. I like to think of myself as a guy that oozes with confidence, right? I mean, like I said, I brush my teeth, I look in the mirror, it turns me on. But admittedly, this is one of those times where I'm a little self-conscious, and let me explain why. We are live at the NFL Combine at the Convention Center, and this, of course, is the epicenter of the NFL world, which in the American sports culture means it's the epicenter of the sports world. And I'm always appreciative. Like Cam came down here. He was here at 5:30 this morning, got everything set up the table, good to go. Everybody's ready to go. And here's the thing. They've got 50 different Radio Row radio stations and television stations all set up to cover the draft. And we're here in pole position. I mean, we're in table number one. I wish I could. Should I lift the camera up, Cam? Can you turn the camera so people could see the Radio Row action? I've got a Chicago television station next to me. There's the New England Patriots just across the way. The Houston Texans are over here, and a couple of things here. So you can see there's if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can see that it's a flurry of activity. And then I feel bad because I don't want to be too loud. It's not library rules. I mean, it's Radio Row. So you got all these people talking and yapping, but I don't want to be like the loud guy, right? So I'm a little self-conscious about being the overly loud guy. But nonetheless, we have what looks to be I don't think it's the Bears. It's a Chicago television station next to us. I'm not sure who's this is what I like to do with these deals. I always like to get to know the neighbors. Like, who's the neighbor over here? Is it Sports Cleveland? Is it Cleveland Sports? So you can bet, like, they got all kinds of stuff to talk about, right? I mean, their franchise is a dumpster fire. So they got all kinds of stuff to talk about. The Cleveland's over here. The Jets are over here. I mean, the Jets don't know what's going on. And here's what happened when I walked in that I think is the most summarizing best point before we get to talking about the Pacers last night in Denver and what happened there, and news actually of another football variation to the city of Indianapolis to get to. But walking in, I realized that I had the perfect summary of the NFL Combine, the absolute perfect summary of the NFL Combine. So I walked over from, for those that are unfamiliar, our station, The Fan, is right on Monument Circle. And the Combine is obviously inside the Indiana Convention Center. So I walked over, and it's a beautiful day out, right? It's great outside. But I wanted to avoid stoplights and whatever else, so I took the tunnels. You can obviously take the tunnel through the Hyatt and then through the mall and into the convention center and down. So I'm walking through the convention center. I've picked up my credential. I'm walking, and this guy sees me coming. And he's getting more and more excited with each and every step that I'm walking towards him. I'm obviously not totally unused to this. But I realize as I'm walking, this guy is overly excited to be seeing me walk towards him. And he walks towards me, and he's decked out, as everybody is in the Combine. I mean, the Combine attire is you've got to wear a pullover, sweatpants, the hat, the backpack, all of the team that you work for. That's the deal. That's the whole thing with the Combine. So this guy is walking towards me and is uber excited and gives me a hug. Like the bro hug, but a hug nonetheless. And it's like, man, what's going on, dude? It's so good to see you. And you get a lot of that with these events because you see the same folks each and every year. Our friend Brandon Cristal, who works at a radio station in Denver, is here almost every year. We get, Janae Coakley, who I saw earlier, our friend that used to work at Wish TV and now works for SNY in New York. She's here every year. You see the same people, and so it becomes a routine when you come to these things. Like, hey, are you going to be there? Matt Verderam, our buddy, right? He's probably over at Taco Bell. But the whole time I'm racking my brain. Who is this guy? How do I know this guy? Who is this guy? And so he gives me the whole, like, how you doing, whatever else. And then as we're parting, and we make very, a little small talk, and as we're leaving, he says, and I quote, "Man, Josh, it's always good to see you. I didn't think you'd be here this year." And then I realized this guy doesn't know who he's talking to. He thinks he's talking to somebody else. He's at the Combine. I don't know who Josh is. Clearly a good-looking guy. But this guy doesn't know who he is. And then I realized he's like one of the head scouts for one of the teams here in the NFL. And it seemed perfectly fitting to me that this perfectly summarized the NFL Combine, because the franchise that seemingly is drafting high every year has a scout out here that can't keep straight who he knows and who he doesn't.
Hey, Coach. How's it going, Coach? Hey, Coach. Hey, Coach.
Everybody, Eddie. Coach, how you doing? You good, Coach? You good, Coach? Constantly, right? So my question for you, Eddie, I will incorporate you into the equation here. What franchise seemingly does it perfectly summarize is completely fitting of getting off to the wrong start at the Combine because they can't remember and recognize who they know and don't know, and they're confusing people of friends of the past?
There are two teams that immediately come to mind.
Okay.
One of them happens to be in the AFC South, that being the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the
Okay.
other being the Cleveland Browns.
Okay, so we got the fellows from the Browns are right over here. It was the Jacksonville Jaguars. This guy from the and I feel bad because we're going to have JP on, our buddy JP Shadrock, who works for the Jags, is going to join us. Should I tell him this story, Eddie? That one of their scouts was like uber overly excited to meet me and thought that I was actually like, I don't know who he thought I was.
You should.
Jake Delhomme? Did he think I was Jake Delhomme? Did he think I was Jake Plummer? I don't know.
Well,
but he called me
clearly he thought you were
Josh.
Josh.
So Josh McCown? Did he think I was Josh McCown? Should I start floating the rumors that the Jaguars are looking at Josh McCown? He was super excited to see me.
You should have started.
He was
the
ready
rumor
to
about the
invite me
Colts.
over for dinner. Yeah, really. Josh, man, how you doing? It's great to see you. I'm good, thanks. Maybe I'll ask JP when he comes over, who is Josh? This is the mystery of the Combine now. Who is the mysterious Josh? All we know is this: handsome fellow. Little gray in the temples, really good-looking dude. Now, the other thing that I'm curious about at the Combine is this. This is a weird year for the NFL Combine. It's a year that you don't have necessarily like the can't-miss absolute number one draft pick, right? I mean, it's not – you don't have Trevor Lawrence coming in or Andrew Luck coming in or, for that matter, the year of the Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and then Anthony Richardson kind of as a late – entry to the party quarterback discussion. You don't have that. I mean, there are players that are up towards the top. It almost feels like by default. Like Shedeur Sanders, I think we know is a great player, but would he be seen in the same light if it wasn't like, oh, man, he's got Deion Sanders DNA? Like, if his last name's Garrison, is he a top 3 pick or is he more like a 12 pick?
No, he's the number 1 pick.
Yeah, okay. Cam Ward. Is Cam Ward really a number one worthy quarterback, or is that because you're in need of a quarterback and he happens to be the best one available, but in most years he's 15? So you have those storylines, but they're kind of But here's my question about this year's Combine of 2025. And it's a deep thought question. It didn't come to me during a 2:38 in the morning brain dropping, but it's a deep thought nonetheless I thought of on the way over. Everybody at the Combine wears the gear of their team. I've mentioned this 1,000 times. You got the sweatshirt with the logo. You got the hat with the logo. You got the backpack with the logo. So which franchise, and I've come to the conclusion that this year there is one, and it's probably not the one you're thinking of. What franchise is the one that deep down, when you are a scout or whatever else, you put on the pullover and you're kind of like, oh, man. Like when you're flying to the Combine, you are a scout, you're an executive, you are in some capacity, you work for the team, whatever it might be. And you get on the airplane, and you're buckling in, and the person next to you sits down, and they're like, so where are you headed? You're like, I'm going to Indianapolis. For what? The NFL Combine. Oh, really? Do you work in the NFL? I do, actually. What do you do? I'm the assistant to the assistant traveling secretary for blank franchise. What franchise deep down are you thinking to yourself, please don't ask the franchise I work for. Please don't ask the franchise I work for. Please don't. Because it's pretty cool to say you work in the NFL. But there have to be some franchises that when people ask, you're like, oh, man. Now it's like, yeah, I work in the NFL, but I work for blank. Like, which franchise is the one that their personnel, their scouts, maybe even their assistants, they're less prominent people are actually deep down thinking to themselves, I kind of wish I worked for another franchise.
Okay, so I have two here. One,
these are the shame. What are the shame-burdening franchises of the NFL?
Well, one of them wasn't shame to me. I was going to say Kansas City, just in the aspect of people may think you know everything about the Chiefs and what's going on there.
But listen, what I'm saying is this: you put on when you get up in the JW. What franchise isn't even staying at the JW? Like, what franchise is at the La Quinta over by the old heliport?
Arizona.
You know what I mean? So nothing wrong with the La Quinta, by the way. Okay, so Arizona, is that where you're going with? Like, which one is the one that you, when you're walking around, you feel like you're the king kahuna when you're walking around until you actually get inside of the convention center, and they're like, oh, gosh. Like, now people are going to see this is the franchise I work for. You going with Arizona, Eddie?
No. Vegas.
Oh, no, Vegas, man. You kidding me? Last year, let me tell you, when I was doing the morning show and we were here, the fellas that worked on the Raiders show, those guys were all party, man. Like, they rolled in. The Raiders folks, they just got here. The Raiders get here usually at like 11:45. They haven't showered. They've been out late. Like, they're closing down Tiki Bob's. The Raiders are all party. I'm all for the Raiders. Cam, who's your pick? Cam, our engineer on site here. I'd like to know your pick. Which is the franchise that you're like, no thanks?
Well, for me, it was the Raiders, but I'd have to go the Jets now.
Okay. I'm with Cam on this. It's got to be the New York Jets, right? If you're the New York Jets, you're walking around and you're saying to yourself, well, we were the talk of the Combine a couple of years ago because we had taken a player very high. And then that didn't work out. Then we were the talk of the Combine again because everybody was wondering if we were going to get Aaron Rodgers. Then we got Aaron Rodgers, and everybody was excited because we were like the sexy pick, and they had just gotten done talking about the fact that Tim Tebow was here 10 years ago. And that thing has gone so backwards that the New York Jets now have to be saying to themselves, oh, my gosh, literally, what are we doing? I mean, they're upstream without a paddle. They punted on Rodgers. They're back to square one. I think the fireman fella, he left, and then he's back, and then he left again, I think. I think Cam's right. I think it's the Jets, Eddie.
What about Carolina? Because their owner makes all the decisions, and if you're a scout or you're somebody who's like, I don't know why I'm here, the owner's going to make the decision for me. Why am I doing
Carolina,
this work?
You're Carolina, and you're like, look, we had the number one player taken. We had the number one player in the draft, and our head coach was out shooting video and selfies and TikTok stuff with C.J. Stroud, and then we ended up going with a member of the Lollipop Guild. Yeah, that's probably right. That's probably fair, right?
With the widow guy.
With the widow hands, right? Yeah. But although Bryce Young's starting to play well. But anyway, regardless, good afternoon to you. My name is Jake Quarry. That is the voice of Eddie Garrison. Cam Blankenship is here as the on-site engineer. We are at the Indiana Convention Center for Combine 2025, although NBA talk is going to be a part of the discussion today as well. And let's begin with what took place last night at the Fieldhouse between the Pacers and the Nuggets. This was one of those that I don't know, and I was thinking about this as I was watching the game. In any sport, whether it's, Dan Marino comes to mind. In the late Dan Marino years when he was with the Dolphins, Dan Marino was out there in full body armor. It looked like he might have had a couple diapers on and could barely walk up to the line of scrimmage, but his arm was incredible. I mean, he's one of the great quarterbacks of all time, maybe, top 5 probably of all time. And a guy with that clout and certainly that level of skill and talent, I understand why they were saying, hey, so long as he can stand up, we're going to put him in the pocket and have him throw the ball. And that's what it was like. I mean, that last game where they were absolutely demolished by Jacksonville, the poor guy could barely move, but they rolled him out there. I was thinking last night as I was watching the Pacers and the Denver Nuggets of other players that I have seen that move the same amount, if not even to the same level, laboriously as Jokic. Every time that he moves up and down the floor, looks like he looks quite honestly like in Full Metal Jacket when Private Pile was having to be carried by Private Joker through the obstacle course. That's what Jokic looks like going up and down the floor. And I don't think it's because he's out of shape. I mean, he's not, obviously. He's a tremendous player. There's just something about his approach that is all business. He's not worried about style points. He's not worried about pizzazz. He's not worried about flair. And I'm not saying anything that you don't know if you've watched the NBA for a long time, but his level of effectiveness, everything runs through him. At one point last night in the game, I look up, and it might have even been in the early third quarter, but I look up at the scoreboard, and I turned to my buddy Michael sitting next to me and said, Jokic has 7 points, but he has been a focal point throughout, to which Michael says he has 15 assists. Or at that point, I think he had 10 or, whatever it may be. He ended up, I think, with 19 assists. He was a rebound shy of a triple-double, which he could have gotten late in the game. I thought it was very rude. The Pacers, with 40 seconds to go, threw up a three as the shot clock was expiring, and there were two players under the basket. It was Michael Porter Jr. and Jokic. And Jokic kind of backed away, and Porter Jr. went for the rebound. I thought, come on, man. You got to let the guy get his triple-double. But nonetheless, the way that Denver, work with him really is interesting in today's NBA, because we talk so much about positionless basketball, but he truly is a point center. They work him up towards the top of the key, and then everything goes through him. When he gets the ball, he has eyes in the back of his head, literally, and he can just kind of spray the ball around. But his vision for last-second passes of players cutting to the basket on the block, if he backs you down, his then ability to very awkwardly and almost uncomfortably just put the ball up where it's the most unorthodox-looking shot, but everything goes through him. And I thought last night, that was a game when you watched the Pacers last night, I thought they did a good job on him. He is the best. I mean, he's the most valuable player in the league. You heard Rick Carlisle talking about it this morning with the morning show. He is the guy that is dictating everything that's taking place. And you could get frustrated if you are the Pacers or you're a Pacer fan in the fact that in the second half of that game, late in the first half, Indiana made a push. They were down 9. They made a push. They got it to within, I think, 3. And that was when Jamal Murray was taking a breather. And then in the second half, the Pacers had multiple opportunities, and I think it was 3 straight possessions they missed a 3, and good looks at 3s. Halliburton missed 1. I think Nesmith missed 1, maybe even 2. Shepard might have missed 1. And you can chalk that up if you want to, hey, Denver's just flexing their muscle here. But I really do think, and I don't normally go here with this, but I really do think that fatigue was strictly the factor there. I just do. I mean, Denver was fresh. Denver had won 9 straight. They were coming off a loss to the Lakers, which obviously was a wake-up call for them. They come in here. They had rest, and then they play in that game, and the Pacers playing in the second night of a back-to-back. And I just think you could tell that their legs went away from them. And you could tell when guys' legs go away from them because the shots are short. They just weren't able to put the ball down. And that's exactly what happened last night. Now, you get a chance to rebound from that with Toronto coming in tomorrow night. It still feels like a pretty quick bang, bang, bang turnaround when you're going Sunday, Monday, Wednesday. Pretty tough to do. Toronto certainly is a team on paper that you look at and say, pretty good opportunity for the Pacers to bounce it back. But they've lost to them already this year. And nice combo. I mean, Scotty Barnes and R.J. Barrett, I mean, 2 pretty good players for the Raptors, but you would feel pretty good about it going in. Last night, I just thought it was, and I'm not saying this to carry the Pacers' water, and I'm sure there are people that are going to listen and say, you don't know the game, you don't know. I get it. But I do think that last night, as much as anything else, that was strictly one team that was fresh and one team that just looked like it kind of hit the wall. It was not for lack of execution, and it was not for lack of game plan. Now, certainly Jokic, you could say, Jake, they allowed Jokic to dominate, but I mean everybody does. That's why he's the most valuable player in the league on multiple occasions, because he is that difficult to guard. I do think that you can look at, and at this point you know who guys are, but if you look at the way that Indiana uses Miles Turner and the way that they bring him up high and then at times kind of use that same pick and roll, it's the same style, of what you would like to see out of what Denver gets with Jokic. But I think Jokic's passing ability is as unique. Arvydas Sabonis would be the closest that I've seen in terms of high post passing ability for a big, of anticipating with point guard type vision and feel the way guys can get open on the blocks and distributing the basketball there. Just very, very impressive. Very impressive. Two of the spectators last night at the game, interesting. One of them, the mayor of Indianapolis, Joe Hogsett, and then the other one, the commissioner of Major League Soccer, who was here, and now just in the last hour or so, I believe, I don't know when officially this was stated or when he was asked about it, but the governor of Indiana was also asked about the possibility of the MLS coming as an expansion team. And I do think, and I'm going to go back to kind of the history lesson for people here that may not remember this. So if you recall, with the MLS and with Indianapolis and with the possibility of expansion into Indianapolis, the most recent city to get an expanded franchise was San Diego within MLS, I believe. They paid, and it was an obscene amount of money, the admission fee. It's not going to be inexpensive for Indianapolis, and I'm all for it so long as the city is not asked to publicly subsidize a stadium or the team coming in. If they can publicly fund and get the public funding for the expansion fee, which is going to be astronomical. The thing that hurt the Indy 11 is the following. The Indy 11 had a goal in mind from the time that they got here. They stated that they wanted to be absorbed into the MLS. And the Indy 11, I'll give them credit, did a remarkable job of building a franchise and then building a fan base. The Brickyard Battalion, they obviously tried to play at Lucas Oil Stadium. I don't need to go over that. I think most people know my thoughts on why they should have played at Lucas Oil Stadium. But then they went back to Michael Carroll Stadium, and then they decided that they wanted to build on the old Diamond Chain location. And at that time, when they were building on the Diamond Chain location and they announced that, you know, I was one of them that said, you're going to have to be very careful here because this is also the site of the former Green Lawn Cemetery, which was the largest African-American cemetery, and I believe Native American as well, cemetery in the city at the turn of the 20th century. And even though they exhumed most of those bones and moved them to Crown Hill in a mass grave, when you are dealing with that kind of potential of unearthing human remains, you don't just unearth human remains and then send them to the State Museum. There's a whole process that goes through that stalls and delays development. And it's a little surprising to me that the Indy 11 did not have more background on that, seemingly. But, in fact, each time that they have tried to develop that area of Diamond Chain for Indy 11 Park, they have hit a snag where they've then been delayed in their development. And eventually, I think the city of Indianapolis and Mayor Joe Hogsett said, you know what, let's see if there's another way to go about this if we want an MLS team. And it is my understanding, my belief, that Joe Hogsett was then approached by a third party having nothing to do with the Indy 11 efforts towards the MLS that said, I can get you an investor. I can get you a developer, but it's outside market. And it's going to have to be completely separate from the Indy 11 efforts. So at that point, the city made a decision, and that decision now looks like it might be starting to come to a head. I'll tell you what that decision was and where things stand on that, and we'll get back into the Combine chat on a big day. JP Shadrach going to join us from Jacksonville coming up just about an hour from now. Scott Agnes going to join us as well, and Stephen Holder on the program going to join us live here at the Combine, and we'll let you know who's talking today for the Colts, including on this radio station. I'll tell you all that next. See, we're right. If you're watching right now on the YouTube, you can see in terms of like the radio row here in Exhibit Hall J of the Convention Center, all of the stations are set up. So imagine this. Imagine you're at Lucas Oil Stadium and there are tables all across the football field with radio stations and then the different teams doing their own media stuff. We are literally in the corner of the end zone. So people that are walking around on the opposite side of where we are is where when you see on television all of the player interviews that take place, that's right on the other side of the exhibit hall from us. As people are leaving that to go out of the exhibit hall, they come around and they have to go right beside me and around. And the Washington Commanders, the entire group of the Washington Commanders walked past, and they looked very official. So I get a little nervous because, they're thinking to themselves, well, this is neat. They're going to come and they're going to see big-time officials and everything like that. And then they come and they're like, who's the guy from the radio show in Indy? Right on the corner. I mean, we are literally in the middle of a fishbowl here. It's kind of exciting. So going back to the MLS discussion, and I get it. I mean, the Major League Soccer, it is, and I've joked about it forever. Soccer's been the sport of the future since 1978. I've said that 1,000 times. But I will absolutely, understand and agree to the fact that even though it has been, and this is the biggest challenge for MLS, has been, the Premier League. I think a lot of young people that are soccer fans are fans actually of more so the European soccer than the United States, than the American soccer. But you get players over here, in Miami, and, there are obviously things that can give it draw. So it would be beneficial for Indianapolis. I mean, it would be a major coup to be able to get a team here. And again, when I believe that the mayor of Indianapolis was approached and told, we can get an investor that is linked to and through the connection of Herb Simon, the owner of the Pacers, that would be interested in bringing Indianapolis into the fold for the MLS and will be part of the ownership group and with a stadium that would be located just beyond where Gainbridge Fieldhouse is in the old heliport area. But in order to do that, it is my understanding that the commissioner of the MLS, who was with yesterday, he was here at the Pacer game, I believe the commissioner of the MLS said, we would be interested in Indianapolis eventually becoming an expansion group, but we don't want to do it with the ownership group of the Indy 11. I mean, that is no personal slight or indictment. It's not my place nor understanding to even know why that would be, but that's come to my understanding in that they just simply said we'd like to go in a different direction than where the Indy 11 are. So you're talking two totally different things. And last night, by the commissioner being here and then the governor today saying that he is open to it, it does sound like, in fact, Indianapolis is moving towards the direction. I don't mean imminently. I don't mean in the next 6 months. But I do think that it is entirely possible now and within reason to say that Indianapolis will be an MLS city sometime in the next, I mean, I'm totally spitballing here, 5 to 6 years. I don't know what the time frame is in terms of when the next cycle of expansions would be for soccer. But nonetheless, I think that's where things stand. Scott Agnes is going to join us coming up 1 o'clock. We will get more into what happened last night at the Fieldhouse. In terms of the combine here, the storylines are interesting because this is one of the years that, truth be told, I think the Colts are out of the conversation a little bit from a national talking point. And that's kind of where you want to be, right? You don't want to be the team that's constantly in the mix in terms of the domino that is going to change the draft. The team that, this draft seems like it's going to go according to plan until pick 4, and then, you never know what they're going to do, and that's going to change. It depends on whether a quarterback goes there. Two things about this year's draft to me that are the most interesting or the most intriguing. And one of them is that you don't have the super can't-miss big-name program, super exciting quarterback coming out. And yes, I realize that Shadur Sanders, because of the fact that he's Deion Sanders' son, and he's a great player. I mean, don't get me wrong. But if this was between he and Cam Ward, I think a lot of people would tell you that those guys are in conversation of being prospective 1, 2, or 3 picks in the draft at quarterback, mostly because it's a dry quarterback year. And in most years, they probably are more. I think back to the year when, I think it might have been the year that Luck was drafted. And you had, no, it was the year that Mayfield was drafted and Josh Allen, I think, was in that draft. And then you had kind of a second push. Josh Rosen went a little bit further down. Darnold might have been in that draft. It feels to me like these two quarterbacks are more that mid to late first rounder level quarterback, except for that there's not a can't miss quarterback in the 1, 2, 3 range. So that pushes them into the 1, 2, 3, because if you're in need of a quarterback up top, you got to go ahead and take care of it then. And that puts those guys in there. Hunter, obviously the Heisman Trophy winner, is the best athlete in the draft, and you could probably put him anywhere. He's intriguing because it's interesting because while Sanders is the guy that is connected to Deion because it's his dad, Hunter's the guy that I think is more the Deion level player. You can put him on either side of the ball. He can make plays. He's athletic. He can cover a lot of areas. I know I sound like a scout now, and I'm not one, although a guy from Jacksonville apparently thinks I am. But those guys are intriguing. And then you get, obviously, Abdul Carter out of Penn State, the defensive end, that may be the best player in the draft. But do you burn a pick on that if you're Tennessee and you're back to square one at the quarterback position? And those are kind of the talking points of this particular combine this year. Now, from a Colts standpoint, we know where they select. They select 14th as of now. We know that tight end is the position that not only is there possibly going to be the best tight end in the draft available at 14, but there's a really good one in that guy out of Penn State. And it seems as though the Colts are going to have the ability to take him if they so choose, unless somebody, of course, jumps up in front of them, which is always possible. In terms of today and the speaking that takes place at the Combine, you got all these people that are starting to show up now because different coaches and different, GMs speak at the podiums here, and all of the media that is covering that prospective team goes and they come out and they hear what they have to say, even though reality, very seldomly do they say a whole lot. But you still need to be on top of it, I realize. Here's the schedule today. And I'm talking about not on this radio station, but in terms of the overall media availability. Chris Ballard, the general manager of the Colts, is 4:30 today. So Ballard speaks at 4:30. Usually those things are, 15 minutes or so. It was here 2 years ago where Chris Ballard kind of tipped his hand that Anthony Richardson was a guy that really impressed them. And I remember sitting out here and having Stephen Holder come in and say, look, and it was at the Combine when C.J. Stroud uttered the famous phrase, "I'm a ball placement specialist," which was a pretty great line and pretty accurate line because he can put the ball where it needs to go. But Richardson here at the Combine showed such an athleticism and such a rarity in terms of that level of athleticism and size that he really moved his way up into the conversation. And I think it was at the Combine that year when Chris Ballard, speaking about him, when you go back and you look at it after the fact, you can say, yeah, he did kind of tip his hand that, in fact, that was a guy that was of intrigue to them. So you can read through the tea leaves a little bit and what they have to say. 5:30 today, Shane Steichen will talk to the media. Now, when he talks Shane Steichen at 5:30 today to the media at the Combine, he's probably going to speak pretty generically. He's probably going to speak coach speak, right? And you have to hope you get him in a one-on-one conversation where you can get a little bit more out of that. The other thing, too, is they're speaking generalities in these things because they're speaking more just in terms to a wider audience. When you really want to get into the nuances of the roster itself and the more esoteric pinpoint stuff, that you do in one-on-one settings, which is what will happen for Shane Steichen tomorrow in the 2 o'clock hour when he joins me here when we're at the Combine. And it will happen for Chris Ballard on the morning program tomorrow live from here at the Combine. And Lou Anarumo, the new – did I get that right, Eddie Anarumo? Yes. I'm on a hot streak with that, Eddie. How many in a row is that for me on that? Is that like 3 or 4 in a row?
I was about to say it's got to be 4 or 5, yeah.
At this point, do we retire the Lou? I'll be honest. I don't even remember how I said it previously. I've just always.
You know what that
I've
is,
always
Jake?
known it. What's that?
A new track record.
No, that's not bad, Eddie. Not bad. Eddie Garrison working it out between that and your Eddie Murphy. And the banana in the tailpipe, you're on it, man.
Thank you.
To use Tom Carnegie's line. Lou Anarumo going to join JMV today from live here at the Combine coming up in the, I think, 5 o'clock hour. The same with Shane Steichen and the fact that these things are always, as we say, fluid. So you're kind of working with what times possibly they could be here. But that is the game plan right now. 4:30 today, Chris Ballard speaks with media. 5:30, Shane Steichen speaks with the media. Shane Steichen tomorrow, 2 o'clock hour with me. And Lou Anarumo, 5 o'clock hour today with JMV. Coming up 20 minutes from now, Scott Agnes, Fieldhouse Files. We'll get back into what happened last night at the Fieldhouse as we continue from the Combine. And again, it's a little uncomfortable because I made fun of a franchise to start the show, and a guy from that franchise is going to join us in 35, and I feel like I might have to give an on-air mea culpa. I'll explain next. So I might have mentioned this yesterday. Might have been after the show. I can't recall. Eddie, you are my buffer on telling me when I'm repeating myself, right?
I try to be.
It's very difficult. I know. It's hard, though. Like, I feel bad for my friends. I know this. I say the word like too much.
What
I give
friends?
analogies too often. What's that?
What friends?
It's a pay group. And in addition to that, I feel bad, though, because when you do radio for 3 hours a day, it's difficult to remember what you talked about on the radio versus with your friends. So a lot of times I'm sure my friends are saying to themselves, Jake's repeating himself again. But yesterday somebody sent me, last night I had to go online and I had to get a visa, not a credit card, a visa to go to the UK. You have to do that if you're traveling to the United Kingdom, which, keep in mind, is now different than the European Union because the United Kingdom, there's Brexit. So England, England, Scotland are part of the UK, and they're different than the European Union. So now to get there, you have to have not only a passport, but you have to get an entry travel visa. So if you are somebody who is going to London anytime, or England, anywhere in England in the next 2 years, listen up. It's very easy to do. I just simply went and got the app, and it's very easy to find. You just Google UK Visa app. I did it last night. It blew me away, but the new passports have a microchip on them. So I simply held the passport next to my phone and it instantly had all the information on the app. Paid $11, which is $13 US, and 40 minutes later, the visa was approved. But I say all that because my cousin and I, and we're getting excited for it, in July are going to Manchester, England to see Oasis for 2 shows, a Friday night and a Saturday night show. We are going to go over, we're going to go to Liverpool, do the Beatles thing, and then go see Oasis. However, after the airfare, the hotel room, the tickets, which were not inexpensive, yesterday email comes out, somebody emailed me, I should say, for an article from a magazine in England that Liam Gallagher has now mentioned that they believe they might only play for 59 minutes. So 59 minutes and 59 seconds is what he says. So it's entirely possible that I'm going over for paying a lot of money to go over there for 1 hour of fun, right? I mean, people do that when they go to Reno, right? I mean, well, let's be real. For what it's worth. So earlier today, I'm walking in here. If you're just joining the show, by the way.
Where have you been?
I mentioned this off the top of the show, but I'm walking into the Combine. And tomorrow on the Combine, we're here. Lou Anarumo is going to join JMV Live, as I mentioned today. And we wanted to be here because this is also the day when the Colts are speaking. And it's kind of, it's literally like registration day in college. Everybody's arriving. Everybody's walking around. It's a big deal. So we wanted to be here for that and to get the ambiance, the feel, and the buzz of the NFL Combine, which is a huge deal and a massive event for the city of Indianapolis. But I walked over from the station, and as I was walking in, this guy decked in all gear of his franchise. Everybody's decked in all gear for their franchise, right? And this guy ran up to me as if I had been the best man in his wedding and was super excited. Truthfully, more excited to see me than any human being should be. And was super excited to see me and gave me the bro hug, which is the half arm hug with the slight, like you're burping a baby on the back. But even more so than that. I mean, it was a more zealous hug than that. And gave me the what's up, good to see you, all the stuff you say to somebody when you can't remember their name. Big guy, what's up? How you doing, Chief? Good to see you. Yeah, good to see you. You good? Everything good? Yeah, good. Okay, the whole thing, right? Except for then does the step back reassess, which the step back reassess when you meet somebody is when you then step back and look at them and you're just, gosh, man, it's so good to see you. Have you lost weight? You know, that kind of thing, right? So he does the step back reassess, and in doing so then says, man, Josh, it is so good to see you. And then walks away. And I didn't have the heart to say, I don't know who Josh is, but I'm not Josh. But you were so excited to see Josh that I'm bursting your bubble if I tell you I'm not Josh. And maybe I should just pretend to be whoever this Josh is in case I need any access to your franchise. And then it dawned on me that what I had just gone through is the perfect synopsis of the NFL Combine. Because if there's any team that you would say, who is a team that would come to the Combine thinking that they're covering somebody or thinking that they're interviewing somebody and then later finding out they interviewed completely the wrong guy? Or they came here in anticipation that they had a meeting with some player or prospect and then got here and realized that they talked to completely the wrong player. What franchise is the one that you would say? You got to guess of like 3. I think most people would say the Cleveland Browns. I mean, the Cleveland Browns, for crying out loud. There's a radio station here that was here doing right next to me. I'm right next to the Browns folks. They've already left. They were here for a half an hour. They packed up and left. They looked around and they're like, what are we doing here? Deshaun Watson's hurt again. We go through this all the time. Our best player has decided he wants to be traded. Why are we here? But it wasn't the Browns. The New York Jets are right across the way. They've got 56 people standing around the Jets table right now. The New York Jets are – can we pan over to see the Jets group for those watching on the YouTube channel? The Jets literally have – I don't know who's over there on the Jets right now. Aaron Glenn might be talking over there. Is Aaron Glenn talking? The Jets have 56 people sitting around their table, right? Can you see – is that the Jets are over there? I don't know if you probably can't see it on the – and it's great radio for me to describe it video-wise. And then we're over here in our little corner. But the Jets would be one that you would think that would go through that sort of a name snafu. But it was the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I should ask J.P. Shadrock because he's the voice of the Jags and he's going to and writes for Jags.com. I'm sorry, and he's going to join us coming up at 1:30. He does each and every year on the Combine. I think Paul Kowarski is going to join us from Tennessee, and we'll get kind of the Titans side of things and what they're looking at with the number 1 overall pick in this draft. Also here at the Combine, but maybe I'll ask JP who Josh is. Because now I'm fascinated. Now my entire day is bordering around who Josh is and how a franchise, the most likely franchise that you would think that has somebody running around talking to the wrong people. It feels perfectly fitting. At any rate, last night at the Fieldhouse, disappointment. Eddie, I think you made a good point also. Tyrese Halliburton last night was again aggressive, and that's what the Pacers need. I really like where Indiana is right now. But if there's one area that I would say I would like to see, not improvement, but that is a disappointment, because they're healthy right now, they're playing well. I know last night was a disappointment, but they're coming out the back-to-back. You could tell that Denver was not only fresh, but Denver, to your point, Eddie, you made this point, really went after Tyrese Halliburton. Once they realized that they had fresher legs, they went after Halliburton, and they really kind of sealed him off. The one, and I never thought I'd say this. There is a story for the Pacers that I've done a complete 180 on. That at one time, at the beginning of the year, I had, and I would absolutely say that if you're a listener of this show, if you're a fan of the Pacers, you 100% would be within your right to say that I have been the face of hypocrisy here. But there's an area where I had a very strong opinion about the Pacers at the beginning of the year, and I've changed my tune on that opinion at this point in the year, which means that I am actually being hypocritical, but I'll explain why I've had the change in tune and why it might show that I'm never happy. I'll tell you what that is when Scott Agnes joins us next. Song was applicable if you were getting ready to interview at the NFL Combine, say, Jim Harbaugh or J.J. McCarthy or Tom Brady, for that matter. Because the song seemingly became synonymous with Michigan football because they would sing it there. But now I feel like every single college plays this song and sings along to it. But Michigan kind of owns it, I guess. And I found that out during the Big Ten Championships a couple years ago when I was in a bar downtown celebrating my buddy Mike Byron's birthday. And it happened to be the night Michigan had just won the Big Ten Championship in football. And somebody put that song on the overhead in the bar, and it was absolute mayhem. Like, what is happening here? Oh, that's what they play at Michigan Stadium. Okay. I just, by the way, in one commercial break counted, and this is not a lie. Cam is here to back me up on this. I just counted in one commercial break to the side of me 11 different you goods. You goods, and then you good? You good, Coach? Yeah, you good? Yeah, no, I'm good, Coach. Everybody loves to say hi to each other at the Combine, but nobody has time to talk. They just say, are you good? Yes, I'm good. I'm good, too. Last night at the Pacer game, one thing that jumped out at me was an area where I realized that I'm the ultimate hypocrite. And the reason I'm a hypocrite is because I recall very vividly, and I've brought this up before, the day that I came in to the radio station and looked at Eddie and looked at Jimmy Cook and said, you know what, guys, I've got a question here that I'm wondering if I'm the only one that is starting to wonder this. And you guys both said, what is it? And I said, is it too early to begin speculating on whether or not Jarris Walker is a bust? And both of you said, it's probably too early, right? But I was truly, genuinely concerned of that. Now, since then, when he has started to play, and we have had him on the show, and we talked about the fact that you could feel and see that things were just slowing down for him, that as he was playing, he was not having to stop and think his way through, but stuff was becoming more instinctive for him. And that ability to see before you became pretty intriguing, because then you could see the things about Jarris Walker that we had heard about that made him the selection that he became, a top 10 pick for Indiana. Part of that was he is very athletic. I think he may be the most subtly athletic player on the roster. His athleticism is not necessarily something that jumps out at you, but he is able to play different positions, and the game slowed down to where he was becoming a reliable shooter, and I thought a really good and intriguing rotational piece because he can play different areas. And now, as we thought was going to be the case since they are healthy, he's fallen out of rotation. And last night I was wanting to see more of him. And I realized that makes me a hypocrite because at the beginning of the year I was saying maybe we're seeing too much. Scott Agnes joins us now from Fieldhouse Files. Scott, do you agree with that assessment of Jarris Walker, that we knew that the minutes were going to be harder to come by, but it feels like it could not have come at a worse time because it was finally starting to click?
Yeah, it's one of those situations, Jake, that the team's finally healthy, and so where do you find the minutes? It's like the NCAA tournament, right? A team is on the outside looking in, wanting in. Okay, so who do you take out? I'm not sure who you can take out right now with the Pacers situation. That's why all along we knew it was going to be difficult for him to find minutes, and it was so important for him, say a guy like Johnny Furphy, to maximize those minutes in the first month and a half when the team was dealing with significant injuries to multiple players.
Let's say, for the sake of argument, that they are down to a point late in the year where a situation is presented where either of those two guys has to get in and give you minutes. Which of those two do you more trust?
Of Jarris and whom?
Furphy. At their
Jarris,
respective
absolutely.
positions.
Yeah, absolutely, Jarris. I mean, Furphy, you can see he's still very raw, very much a rookie. I'm glad that the team is beginning to send him more to the Mad Ants and get that playing time like he did yesterday, where he dressed for the Pacers but played earlier in the day and played well. Had a double-double, something like 20 and 12. But with Jarris, I think, like you said at the start, things were starting to click, and he's gaining more confidence. And I think he was starting to take pride in confidence in doing the little things versus a much different role. Like these guys, you remember, like a star player, a lottery pick. They're used to being the best player on their team or one of the best players. So it is a significant adjustment to come in here for most players and not even be in the rotation or not have a key role there. But to answer your question, it'd be Jarris Walker for sure.
Scott, give me an area of your life that is outside your comfort zone. Give me something that you have been asked to do or had to do where you felt uncomfortable from the get-go.
That's a deep thinking question right here on this Tuesday. I think my biggest thing has always been patience. Just having patience and on a daily basis, if that makes sense.
Okay, so if there was something where you had to, and I realize you mean patience maybe in terms of life process, but if there's a situation where you're at the B&B and you got to sit and it's an hour and a half wait, or you're sitting waiting for an airplane. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go with a flight, right? You're on a delayed flight and you're sitting on the runway. We've all been there, okay?
Yep.
And you are visibly uncomfortable. That's what Nikola Jokic looks like the entire time he's going up and down the court. And yet, honestly, is there a player who looks more labored in their craft than Jokic?
Labored and casual. He almost looks too casual, right?
Yes.
But then the game comes so easily, and I think that to his detriment in credit, that's why he doesn't get even more attention. Probably also playing in Denver has a thing to do with it. But he has been the dominant player in the league for 5 years now. Multiple MVPs. Should have been, I think, 3 in a row here. We'll probably get this one, although SGA down in OKC is pushing him. To me, it's his vision. It's his passing. It's just you physically look at him and don't expect him to do the things he's able to maneuver and do.
I think his vision to me is so impressive because as he's working up, he's a point center, okay? So he's up at the top of the key. He works that pick and roll so well. But and I watched him, even when he's basically backing someone down 15 feet from the basket, which sounds absurd, he has a general feel and knowledge for where players are coming in off of the wings and can turn around and make a pass in anticipation that someone is going to be in that exact spot. It's Peyton Manning-esque, right? He's throwing it 2 steps ahead of the guy, but he anticipates it. So my question for you, Scott, you have covered the NBA for a while. You've traveled around, and in particular in watching the G League. What is it about is there a different style of play at the youth level in Serbia and Croatia? Because if you look at Doncic, you have the same thing. The anticipation and the vision of ball movement and of moving the ball around a step ahead of everybody and doing so in a very calm and slower fashion. Is it a different style of play there than what you see in the States?
It is, and I think the biggest thing, though, that comes to mind, Jake, in this situation is the value in the fundamentals, the value in practice versus games. Now, I haven't been on the AAU circuit regularly, but it still seems like, many guys might go up to Westfield and play 3 games on a Saturday, whereas you go to Serbia or overseas anywhere, and for them to play 3 games in 1 week is deemed excessive and unusual. And so I think it comes back to that. We heard Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, talk a little bit about that while we were over in Paris and how they want to see some of that European game translate more into the United States and for more improvement on those levels. We're seeing players more talented than ever just from a skill set standpoint. But I think from a complete – and I think game manager even in football is a negative connotation, but I don't look at it like that. I think one of the best descriptions of Jokic is how much of a command of the game he has. And it doesn't look forced. And it doesn't look like he's stretching himself or his team. And so I loved even the fact you could see the emphasis yesterday of them racing down the court, taking advantage of the Pacers in transition. But that did lead to a couple careless turnovers, a couple things that did not work. But they stuck with it, and were still able to capitalize on that. And they realized that was to their advantage. And, again, I think you also, Jake, are also seeing it with some of the younger guys. I think one of the biggest things with Nembhard and with Halliburton is their vision and being 2 steps ahead. I love the fact that watching Tyrese in transition, when he's looking to get the ball inbounded, he'll look down the floor before he catches the ball, trying to visualize maybe the play he wants to run or the defense and how they're trying to attack them defensively. I think that's something that's been huge over the last couple of years.
When you look, Scott Agnes, Fieldhouse Files on the always busy and available to be sponsored, once again, guest line. Scott, when you look at last night, for example, and now that we've had a couple of game sample size with this team healthy, and you've got to be encouraged by it because they played well. I mean, last night, I truly believe, and maybe I'm an apologist, I think last night was fatigue as much as anything. But when you look at where they are now, of the players that are in rotation, which one do you feel like is most likely to have his game thrown off a little bit because of having all hands on deck, that takes him away from the rhythm that he's used to with the rotations as they are now?
Yeah, I think right now it's Benedict Mathurin. It's it's making that transition again, going from starting lineup to reserve and playing with different guys. I think that's a guy that I'm wanting to see or see how he adapts maybe over the next couple of weeks, as now it becomes more permanent, right? I think he did a couple games off the bench entering break. I thought they'd wait till break, but they lost a couple in a row and said, all right, we got to make a change. And now Neesmith's playing his best basketball of the season. But again, to go back to what I was talking about with Jarris, Mathurin has been the dominant guy, growing up and at Arizona. And when he played down in the Latin American Academy down in Mexico and such. So that is an adjustment for him. And I prefer him off the bench because he can be more featured. He can star in his role that he's used to. But I think that's the biggest thing.
Do you think talking about Benedict Mathurin, you think he's handled that? You think he's been okay with that?
I think so. I think like any competitor, and that's one of the key attributes this front office has gone after in the last few years, is gone after high-level competitors. So it's not going to sit well with you, but I think you can try to use that fuel as kind of a motivation and try to, quote-unquote, earn your way back in, while also going back to what I need in patience, recognizing, hey, you're still on your rookie contract here. If you're Mathurin, you've had to improve defensively. You've had to prove playing within the flow of the game, within the style in which the Pacers want to play, rather than just putting your head down and attacking. He's their best player, probably along with Siakam, in getting to the free throw line and attacking. But those adjustments for a 21-year-old are not easy to come by. But I think he's taken in good strides.
Scott, were you at all discouraged last night when the Pacers had multiple opportunities to either get over the hump, get themselves, even a lead, and they couldn't get over, say, that 3 to 5 point area? They had 3 straight threes, good looks at threes late in the game. Were you discouraged by it? Was that schematic or was that fatigue?
I think it was a combination of fatigue, as you referenced with the Pacers, and also things just clicking and going smoothly with this Nuggets team. Sometimes they're heavy-handed with just Jokic or Murray, or maybe Aaron Gordon had a game. I think it's so rare to see a complete performance by so many guys. I think they had 6 guys with 15 or more points. And at any one time in the game, a different guy took over. And so I thought we saw a championship-level team assert themselves on the Pacers and play motivated after being embarrassed by the Lakers. So I was less discouraged by the Pacers, given those factors and the fact of the level of opponent that they were playing.
You know what's funny, Scott? When you look at great teams and eras in the NBA and great players, Jokic has won how many Most Valuable Player awards now? Is it 3? 2?
2 of them, with another one probably to come.
Yeah, so 3, right?
I didn't think Embiid should have won that one.
So when you have a player like that, and then you have Murray, who is an elite-level streak shooter, Aaron Gordon, who's been known for dunk contests and highlights in that regard. For that matter, Michael Porter Jr. is a really good player, right?
Yeah.
When you have teams like that, oftentimes and typically you have a buzz about it. You have a feel in the arena. I go back to, I call it the old MSA bus on the ramp days. There were certain teams that on the bus ramp, which was on the east side of Market Square Arena, when the bus would be up there in the cold and you could see the exhaust coming out, and there were all kinds of little kids like Jake Query and Dewey Williams standing there trying to get a pair of shoes from a team. And certain teams had this feel about. The Lakers had it in the 80s. The Bulls obviously had it in the 90s. And then the LeBron Heat teams had it. The Warriors had it. There's an energy and a buzz in the building. is this team, the Nuggets, for a team that has won a title and has a multiple MVP winner on its roster, does it have the greatest disparity between its placement within that, but its lack of overall energy and buzz? And I'm not saying that they're not great, but it doesn't have the fanfare that comes with it. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think you do have some fans. I knew a couple that hadn't been to many games this season, but made a point to buy this within their 6-game package because you want to have the opportunity to get a look at one of the game's greatest of all time and obviously the current best player in the league. But the thing that makes Nuggets so interesting is Jokic is doing this without another all-star on his roster. In the last couple of decades, what have we talked about? Like a big three. And that has not been the case. Now, they have high-level talent. Don't get me wrong, with Gordon and obviously with Jamal Murray, who's kind of had a rocky season, but he's really picked it up in the last 6 games or so. But there just does not have that appeal. Part of it's probably the market. I feel like Denver's just kind of a casual I remember traveling with IUPUI going over there and going to a Nuggets game, and there just wasn't much of a crowd. They weren't relevant until this new era. But to your point, the disparity is massive. It does not attract the crowd. Last night it wasn't even a full sellout. Close, but also Mondays are difficult.
And again, you also wonder when you talk about how Jokic doesn't have all-stars, you wonder how many guys he has. He could make role players borderline all-star. Now, Jamal Murray's a really good player, and I think could be an all-star a lot of places. But, Gordon and Porter, for that matter, I think Porter's a good player, but would he be that good without Jokic? He just facilitates for so many different things. And I don't know that I've seen it that up close and personal and paid that much attention to it until last night.
That's one of the best things I think we see from Jokic is his ability to do whatever the team needs from him on a given night. If he needs to go for 40, he has that ability. Or like last night, we saw him go for a career-high 19 assists. And he gets triple-doubles so casually, and they aren't forced like we have seen some players. And even with Russell Westbrook, like he is a very good player to play alongside Jokic with the style of play. And I think that pairing has worked out better than I originally had envisioned. But, Jokic is a guy I would totally want to be my teammate. It might frustrate you how sometimes it seems like you take the game so casually, and certainly all-star games with the foreign players. But, man, when you get out there, he is one of the best players, if not the best, every single game out there.
The other thing I noticed last night, and I don't know where it happened, I guess it's just people think the NBA is a non-contact sport. This is going to sound really weird. Yeah. Jokic's arms last night looked like he had just gotten done wrestling with a badger. Did you? I mean, you know what I'm talking about? Like just the scrapes, the cuts, like all over, and you realize just how physical it is, and just how big he is in general. I think he's deceptive in his movement. I think people think because he moves so kind of labored up and down the court, they think that means that he doesn't have quickness, and he doesn't have. But his vision and his movement absolutely are totally quick, right?
The best example of that might be one of those post moves. He had Miles Turner on his back, jabbed one way, and made a quick spin move. So as slow-footed as he kind of visually looks, he easily maneuvered around Miles and laid it in with the left hand, crafty with the finish. He's just fun to watch. There's nothing special in terms of like that, a 35-foot shot or a massive dunk. And that's why part of his game just comes along quietly and maybe does not get the attention that he deserves.
Scott, would the NBA – maybe the NBA does this. Would the NBA be smart – maybe they do this already. I know the NBA now does, obviously, a draft combine, so to speak. I mean, they have Portsmouth and they have the different, leagues or tryout places where people can go. Would they be smart to open it up the way the NFL Combine has? I mean, I'm here at the Combine, and this is a bigger radio row than you see at Final Fours. I mean, the Final Four radio rows, there's 18 stations there. Yeah. There are 55 tables set up here.
NFL marketing genius, man. They have made the entire calendar year about them, and it's admirable what they've been able to do there. You're seeing. I thought you were going a different route and saying welcome more international players to the draft combines and things like that. And they do have a combine, so to speak, over in Treviso, Italy each summer. But in terms of like the media front, that's where the NBA in particular, really leans into NBA All-Star Weekend. That's their kind of real showcase event, which is why it's so baffling a little bit how mismanaged it feels like All-Star events and lack of interest there are, because they go all in for that event. And that's another reason why I'm excited to see how NBC treats it, presents it, tells the stories at All-Star Weekend as they take over the rights next weekend.
You've got, let's see here, in the NFL. Okay, now see, Scott, here's the thing. So I'm at the Combine, and you try to mind your P's and Q's. You try to be respectful of your audible space, right? I don't know if you can hear it or not, but just one of the other stations just signed on. Guy's screaming like he's at P.T. Barnum. Can you hear that? You probably can't hear that, can you?
Not very well, no.
Who's that down there? Cam? Who's yelling down there? Usually it's the Oakland guys. The Oakland guys get out of bed around noon and they get here, but I don't think it's the Oakland guys. But some guys down there screaming like they're probably saying that about me. Who knows? NFL calendar goes as such. You got Super Bowl. Then after the Super Bowl, you get like 3 weeks off. Okay. Then you do the draft combine. Then you get into what? The next thing would be obviously the draft, right? Free agency is in there.
Free agency as well. Yep.
We're forgetting here. OTAs. Yep, we got to do OTAs. Schedule release day. Don't forget schedule release day. Yep, rookie mini camp, and then into mini camp, and then into the Hall of Fame game, and etc. You are right. I mean, it is a nonstop schedule. Not unlike the schedule Scott keeps in covering the Pacers. Fieldhouse Files, where you can read his work and all of his coverage. Pacers back on the court tomorrow night, taking on the Raptors of Toronto. Scott, we appreciate it as always.
You bet. Thank you, Jake.
All right, Scott Agnes joining us on the guest line. Yeah, Cam, do we know who that is down there that all of a sudden that almost awakened me? Somebody, and there was somebody else. And when I went down just a second ago during one of the breaks, I went down to say hello to someone, and there was one station that just, I think it was the Buffalo guys. The Buffalo guys, very, very loud, very loud. The Chicago folks next to us, very nice. Eddie White's walking up, very nice. I'll bet it was Eddie White. Eddie White had to have been the one that was screaming so loudly. He's just Eddie asked if I'm on the air. Yes, I am on the air. Coming up, JP Shadrack going to join us from Jacksonville. I'm going to ask who Josh is, because it was a Jaguar scout earlier today that ran into me and thought that I was Josh. And was very excited to see me, and it's not often that people are excited to see me. Eddie White will not. Here, Eddie can give us the rundown on the. Exactly. So Eddie White is here, of course, from the Pacers postgame show, who
world's
just got done with that like 3 hours ago. The world's greatest postgame show. Eddie Garrison has corrected me. So Eddie White in his fever gear, but Eddie, when I was walking in, a guy was super excited to see me. And literally, and he's decked out in his team gear, and he's super excited to see me and gives me the bro hug, and then is like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. Then he does the step back, where you step back to reassess the person, to look over them again on how good they look, and I got a little shoulder squeeze. Man, you look good. God, it's great to see you. And the whole time I'm thinking, I have no idea who this guy is. And then, but I don't want to say it to him because I don't want to let him down, right?
You didn't recognize Stevie Wonder?
This is your entire life, I realize. So he then says to me, as we're walking away, Josh, it's always good to see you. And I realized that I don't know who Josh is, but I don't want to let him know that it's not Josh he's been talking to. But he was wearing a full decked out in Jacksonville Jaguars gear, and I found it only fitting that someone from the Jaguars would be at the Combine and completely misidentify everything going on, right?
That's a good one.
Doesn't it kind of seem fitting of any franchise?
So you don't know who he thought you were, or did you look it up?
Josh McCown, I think. They might be signing him. I don't know. I have no idea.
Is there someone with Jacksonville in their front office named Josh?
Well, no, but Eddie,
he wouldn't have.
Eddie, anybody that's down here in the front office, it's a rule. You have to wear head-to-toe gear.
Oh, it's like the old. Remember that you go to the Final Four, and all the coaches wear their tracksuits.
Of course,
yeah. Whatever the schools,
and it's schools you've never heard of, right?
Absolutely.
McNeese State Southern. Good to see you, Coach.
Absolutely.
You good?
Eddie Garrison University. I mean, a lot of.
You good?
Am I good?
Well, no. I'm just saying that's
that's what they say.
I know you're good. You're always good. Thoughts on last night, by the way? I chalked it up as a fatigue game, and I'm not trying to just give them credit,
right.
Right.
Denver looked fresh, and Jokic is really good.
Well, hopefully that's the case tomorrow because Toronto plays tonight, I think, at home.
Denver was not coming off a back-to-back,
No,
right?
they were not.
Right.
But Toronto will be tomorrow night when they get here, so hopefully it's the reverse for us. But this Jokic is unbelievable.
His vision is –
I watched the Lakers game on Sunday night. I don't know. We play so many games. It was like 3 games ago on our post-game show. I'm already talking about the game. And I'm like, this guy might be the best big man passer I've ever seen because he's like Larry Bird. He sees things that
before
nobody
it
else.
happens.
Yeah.
And you know what? Actually, you got time to stick around for a second?
Yeah. You got to go to a break. You got commercials.
I didn't know if there's somebody you need to go. Josh might be hanging around the corner.
You still got the show, right? And
we'll continue with Eddie White.
Is this still your show?
Well, theoretically.
Hey, dude, don't leave. Don't get off the air. Be like Jerry Lewis. Just stay on and don't refuse to leave.
It's a telethon.
Exactly.
JP Shadrack going to join us here in just a couple of minutes as well, and Eddie White gracing us with our presence. And I just stood up, so if you really want to just see what my mid-waist looks like, just go ahead and get on the YouTube page. We'll be back here live at the NFL Combine on The Fan. Now, I said yesterday the 3 most important jobs at the NFL Combine. The 3 things that get the biggest workout. The guy that might set the record for most bench press reps would be one of the record holders. Somebody's going to try to break the record for fastest 40 time. That's always a big anticipated moment at the Combine. And then the selfie trigger finger of Eddie White during the Combine in full-fledged.
I don't do it anymore. I could have done it last night. I saw Sean Payton twice, and I could have done the thing, but I'm like, nah, I just talked to him. Maybe I'm getting old, and it's like, what the heck? Hey, we'll say this. When I think of the Combine, 100 years ago, I was at Reebok. I'm playing golf in a tournament charity thing in Delaware, and our celebrity is former Eagle Mike Mamula. Okay, I knew the name, whatever, Boston College.
I mean, he's the poster child of the Combine.
Exactly. But I didn't put 2 and 2 at that point. And so we're with Reebok. How you doing? He goes, where are you guys from? I said, I'm from Indianapolis. He goes, Indianapolis is my all-time favorite city. I went, why? He goes, it made me a lot of money.
Yep.
He goes, I would have been a 4th or 5th round pick. I came here to the Combine. I won the Combine, and I got drafted in the 1st round by the Eagles, got a crap load of money, and he really never had it.
If I'm not mistaken, Eddie White, by the way, is our guest, who, of course, you hear on the Pacers postgame show with the Pacers and the Fever. And you have been around the NFL a long time. And for those that are unfamiliar, Mike Mamula was a guy out of Boston College that, and I don't know if this part is factual, but allegedly or supposedly his agent or representative or a coach or somebody said, this Combine's becoming a really big thing, and here are the drills they're going to have you do. And he did nothing but prepare specifically for that.
And That's true.
So he was an average student that figured out all the questions of the SAT, and he got a 1590 on the SAT, and then boom, his 2.7 gets him into Harvard, basically, right?
Exactly. It made him a lot of money.
And I think he was if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to look it up. He was a sufficient NFL player, but he was not a lottery pick.
Not worthy
player.
of a 1st round pick. No,
right.
No, not at all.
Good for him, though, right?
Yeah.
So at what point did the NFL Combine shift from the super intensive, high-powered, top-secret, end-all, be-all informational gathering thing into the marketing arm of the PR juggernaut that it's become?
I would bet either 10 to 15 years, because I can remember the early years, even when we were Reebok, we were credentialed, whatever, none of us could ever go into the Dome.
Correct.
The Dome was like, you get to a point and like they will shoot you. Only coaches and scouts were allowed in there, and everything that went on in there, no one could see. And then over the years, the NFL figured out, wait a minute, we could put some of this stuff on television to make some money, and then the media started. I'll never forget, Jake, the first year I moved here to work for Logo 7, we had an idea to have a cocktail party at the top of Pan Am Plaza. No one ever done anything like that before. So it was Gibbs, Ditka, Landry, Shula, the old coaches, and I think there might have been 3 media people, like Mike Chappell and maybe somebody else. And now look at it; it's crazy. It's amazing. But I'll leave you with this, because you got more important guests coming up. It's the only thing in America where if you surveyed the people who utilize this thing, it would be 100% to keep it here in perpetuity. The scouts, the coaches, the trainers, the medical people.
The medicals,
now,
the
unfortunately,
biggest, right?
they don't get to vote in this precinct. Those are 32 other people that get to vote whether to keep it here or not. But if the people who utilize this event, it's the perfect city, the perfect location for this.
They flirt this every year that it's going to go elsewhere, and then every year we find out it's on another one-year deal, and then today at least it's 50 and sunny out, right?
Yeah, it's like this year round. Remember,
right.
Chamber of Commerce, tell anybody who's not from here, it's like this year round. It's lovely. It's good to see you. And tell Eddie Garrison I said hi.
Will do.
Bye-bye.
Eddie White, our friend, joining us here. And if you come down to the Combine and you're unsure which one he is, look for the guy with the orange hair. And it's very easy to spot Eddie White, Eddie White, who walks away. J.P. Shadrick is our friend from Jacksonville and the Jaguars. Now, JP, it's good to see you.
Great to
it's
see
becoming
you.
a tradition. Let me run past you what happened to me on the way in.
Yes.
This has been the talking point all day. And I somewhat poked fun at the Jags at their expense on this, but
it's fair. You're not the only one.
So I'm walking in, and as you know, you don't listen to this show. I mean, you don't live in town. There'd be no reason for you to listen to the show. My mom doesn't listen to the show, and she lives here. So I have not set you up for this. When you see the Combine, guys run into each other, is it true or false that literally what you see is a bunch of guys and they all say the same thing? You good? You good? Hey man, you good? I'm good. Yeah, you good? You good? And then boom, they move on.
And
right?
how long are you here? When are you leaving?
That's right.
That's kind of the out.
Where,
I've been to St. Elmo yet? Yeah, sure, have. Yeah. How's the new coach? Oh, he's good. All right, well, see you later.
when are you leaving is the out, right?
When did you get in? Oh, yeah, we got in Monday. When are you leaving? Friday. We're out of here Friday. Oh, okay, we're leaving tomorrow. Okay, see you later.
So I'm walking in over from the station today, and as I'm walking through, I see a guy that is overly excited to see me. Not unusual. And as I'm walking, this guy's like super excited, and he gives me the "how you doing" in the bro hug, with the tap on the back. And then he does the step back reassessment, which is then followed by the shoulder rub, right? And then with the shoulder rub, then the disbelief step back of reassessing with the, man, it's good to see you, right? And then he says to me, now, and this whole time I'm thinking, I have no idea who this guy is, right? I've never seen this guy in my life. But as all of this ends, he then says, man, Josh, I got to tell you, it is just always good to see you. And I said, well, you too. And we went on about our way. Now, he was dressed in all Jaguars gear. So what I want to know is, who in Jacksonville do I look like named Josh? And I didn't have the glasses on.
That's a great question.
What Josh am I?
I don't know. I feel like Larry David right now. Keep your hands to yourself, people. Like, what are we doing? Don't touch me. Why? I don't care if I know you or not. I don't know you that well.
Well, you
don't need to be touching your. Keep your hands off my shoulders.
If you're doing the massage, the lat rub, then that usually means like former roommate or something along those lines.
Okay.
Like know him well, right?
You had no idea who it was.
No. Some guy for the Jags. Very excited though.
Well, go Jags.
And then I wondered if that's not symbolic of the Jags misrepresenting what's going on at the combine, but I can't say that to you because you work for the Jags. But let's begin with this. Kidding aside, and I think you know this from the past times that we've talked. Mm-hmm. I am, and I still am, a huge believer in Trevor Lawrence. I really am. I think he is the closest thing. When he came out, I thought he was the closest that I've seen to Peyton Manning in a variety of ways. Now, he obviously has not gotten footing underneath him in totality in Jacksonville. Is that because of Trevor Lawrence or because of instability around him?
I think yes. I think there are multiple reasons. Yes, one of those is the instability because it's now his third head coach, coming up, and a different offense again, and terminology, and all that and I think he'll be able to handle all that. A lot of it, though, is the way the style in which he's played has hurt himself sometimes, where I'm going to take a headfirst dive for no reason and hurt my shoulder. So there's a little bit of that goes with Trevor. You got to kind of coach him from himself sometimes. Now, part of it, too, is the lack of confidence in the offensive line at times. It's been so bad on the interior of the O-line over his career. I don't blame him for looking down and trying to run for his life sometimes because that confidence to stand back there and know the pocket's going to be clean and get rid of it, it just hasn't been consistent enough.
But he has weapons, right? I mean, they have done it. I don't think that it's fair to say that Jacksonville has failed him per se because they have tried to go out and get him some pieces,
well,
right?
Okay, well, you still have to throw it to some of those pieces. He didn't throw it to Brian Thomas. Mac Jones threw it to Brian Thomas last year, right? So if he's going to be on the field for you, you got to throw it to him more than 3 times in a game in his direction. And that didn't happen for whatever reason earlier in the season.
He's just not going through reads properly?
I think it goes back to the confidence up front. No time, and that's, he's a deep threat and that kind of idea. They just didn't have that sync early in the season, at least for me. That was my vantage point of it. I think that can build, and I think they will build this offense around Trevor and around Brian Thomas.
Do they still believe in him the way they did when they drafted him?
Well, this group didn't draft him. However, this group has 6 more years on his contract, so they're gonna believe in him and build around it as long as they can. Yes, I think that's a big reason why Liam Cohen showed up is to have the ability to work with a guy like Trevor and build an offense around him, and so yes, they definitely believe in Trevor and what he can be. But, I mean, you got to go see it on the field too. We can talk about it till we're blue in the face. We've done that for years. You got to go play.
How many different periods were there when you saw on the field, boom, it's arrived, or did that happen for you?
I mean, there's a few of those moments. A few times a season, you're like, oh, okay, this is the throw. Here's the arm strength, or here's the vision down the field that we've have heard about. And but it's just not enough yet. It can come. It's not gone forever. It's in there, and it's going to come out, especially in this new offense. If they are truthful, which I think they are, and how they're going to build this thing and have him involved and do all the things right. I think there's still a lot out there for Trevor Lawrence.
You got time to stick around for a minute?
Whatever you want.
Okay, we will come back because I want to ask also about, because when you're talking about the AFC South, I'm curious your thoughts on Indianapolis also, and just where Jacksonville may be. And is this literally a one-team division with 3 looking up? You know, where do we stand? And what's Jacksonville looking for, to try to make things whole for them as well? We'll continue that conversation here at the Combine. That's J.P. Shadrick from Jacksonville, covers the Jags. We'll be back here from the Indiana Convention Center. You're listening to the Combine coverage from 2025. You're listening to it on The Fan. From Jaguars.com, we usually play, and it's too stereotypical, we usually play Leonard Skinner for him because they're from Jacksonville. Yeah. And then he mentioned that he's a native of Birmingham, Alabama. I know that Courtney Cox is from Birmingham. I don't know what
she's from a nicer area than I am. Mountain Brook. Yeah, Mountain Brook, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's the ritzy area, right?
Oh, yeah.
They got a restaurant on top of the hill up there.
They got a lot of things that we don't.
What area of Birmingham are you from? The other side of the tracks,
the
right?
other one, not that one.
The other side of the tracks, all right. Fair enough. Brian Adams from Canada, by the way, which is about as far in the antithesis of Birmingham or Jacksonville as you can get. So with this Jaguars group, and I hate to say this, JP, and I don't mean this. I mean, look, the Colts have been there.
Just say it, man. Just say it.
It's a rite of passage every year of, hey, the Jaguars are going to be drafted. You know, they need help. They've got their biggest glaring area of need right now is what?
I think it is the middle of the defense. And let's start up front. Interior defensive line, they couldn't stop the run consistently. They had issues up there. Linebacker play was inconsistent. Devin Lloyd didn't know where he was going a lot of times. And then the safety play was atrocious. Big plays allowed week after week. Andre Sisco didn't play well at all. So right through the middle of the defense. But and hearing Liam Cohen and the new GM and Baselli talk, it's going to be a big people game. That's what they're going to do. It's going to be D-line. It's going to be interior offensive line like we talked about, protecting Trevor, giving him a little more confidence up front. I think that's where it'll begin. You got some aging interior offensive linemen in Mitch Morse and Brandon Sheriff, the center and right guard, who in their 11th year, they may or may not come back. Who knows? Like, they might retire. So you might have a real immediate need there that you don't know about yet. So for me, that's where it is. They have a lot of other issues we could get into, too. They need another cornerback. They could use another receiver. I mean, Gabe Davis is there. He's under contract. You're not getting out of that, but he was banged up a lot. Christian Kirk, they're talking about maybe, okay, you could redo his deal to get the cap number down. That hasn't happened yet. And Brian Thomas. So, and they got running backs. So I think it's big guys, interior of both lines. Let's start there.
Back to the quarterback play in Trevor Lawrence. I mean, the last time we saw him, it was a pretty ugly concussion. I mean, not that there's a non-ugly concussion.
This was a bad one, yeah.
How has that, to your knowledge, has he addressed how that has impacted him, his mindset? Sometimes, JP, the reality is guys come back and they see ghosts after stuff like that.
You know, it feels like this one took a while, too. It wasn't like the next week. You know, he was still in the protocol for a couple weeks after that, technically. He wasn't going to come back and play. He could have come back, I think, with like a week to go in the season, but why? What are we, what's the point? You're out of the race and there's no reason. It's not like it was at fault. I mean, he slid early. Right. He did everything right. Aziz just hit him in the head.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly play.
I mean, and Houston had all the their side of it and all the things, whatever. It doesn't matter anymore. I don't think it'll change the way he plays. I really just think that's how he's going to be. But that's the reason why he's been hurt a lot, too, is because he runs out wide and he'll call his own numbers sometimes. And you know what? Head first dive, got his left shoulder dinged up when he didn't have to do it. So how do you coach him? How does he accept it to still be aggressive, but okay, hey, at some point I've won this battle, let's step out of bounds or do something like that. That's still going to be a work in progress with him because he's an instinctive athlete. He wants to go run. He can move. He's got good legs. But you just got to sometimes, hey, just get down on this one.
When you look at the way that J.P. Chadwick is our guest here, we're at the Combine, and he writes for the Jaguars, Jaguars.com. In the AFC South, it's interesting because if you're looking to build a defense, I think sometimes teams build towards who they know they're going to go against and what they need to play against. Mm-hmm. The Jaguars maybe are at a tough spot because in the AFC South, you know what you're getting in Houston with C.J. Stroud. Yep. You know what you need to do with him, right? But outside of that, you don't know what Tennessee's going to offer in terms of the quarterback. You don't know. You have an idea maybe if everything falls into place what Indianapolis is going to offer with Anthony Richardson, but is he going to be the guy? We don't know that, but he is a more mobile quarterback, so do you have to build against that? Is there a danger in building against what the other teams are or are going to be?
Right, because, I mean, that could change in a heartbeat with Anthony Richardson, right? The way it's gone, he hasn't been out there a lot of the time. So then what? All right, what have you built toward? You built towards something that's not out there. So that can change in a heartbeat. Like you said, Tennessee, let's see what they do in the draft this year at number one and all those other places. But what is their identity? They're trying to figure out what they are. So you can't really build to what you don't know. CJ is going to be in Houston for a while, it feels like. They've got a little something going on down there, and the pass rush game's good. So that's one you can kind of rely on, I think. And that's going to be a really tough out, I think, for a long time.
Did we get a little bit misled by Houston, though? Because they got off to a great start, and this has happened the last couple of years. right? They get out to these great starts, and then they're like backpedaling in November. Like November and December are not good months in Houston.
How do they carry that momentum forward? I mean, guys got hurt and things happen, but you still ought to be able to finish stronger than they have. And that's been an AFC South problem, by the way. That's not just when Houston's in the lead. I mean, my gosh, the Jaguars, 2 years ago, had a 3-game lead or whatever.
About that, yeah.
And blew it. They were 8-3 and blew it. And the year before that, Tennessee had a 4-game lead on the Jags. They blew it because they had all these injuries, and the Jaguars won on the last day of the season to win the division. So it's been a divisional problem. It's not just a Houston problem. That's been almost every division champion the last 4 or 5 years has either, failed late and kind of got to the edge or had to overcome somebody who was doing it. And it's just been nobody's run away with this division in a long, long time.
What are your thoughts? I mean, you see them. You have to talk to the coaches and the administrators of Jacksonville seemingly at times about Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. Your overall thought, and you saw Anthony Richardson presumably in college, your overall thoughts on where the Colts are right now.
Yeah, I had a bunch of Florida games on radio, and, there were moments that he didn't play a lot of football, right? He was hurt some down there, hamstring issues or whatever it was, and, okay, that's fine. He's an incredible athlete. How do you keep him out there? How do you keep him on the field? I think that's the biggest question, and you guys know that firsthand. So if that's going to be the way you go, every organizational part of it has to be to get him out there each and every Sunday. And that you guys know this too. It used to be like that with Peyton. Hey, everything we do in the organization is to make sure 16 is on the field, or 18 whatever his number was here, 16 in college. He's got to be up on the field, or we don't have a chance. So everything we draft, everything we call offensively, everything we teach the quarterback about how to slide 5 yards early, it's for that. So if Anthony Richardson is your guy, let's do everything in our power, from the strength and conditioning to the training room to the play calling to everything, to make sure he's upright and ready.
I think the thing, JP, that was hard for the Colts and has been hard for the Colts is that you want to do those things for Anthony Richardson, but I think there's question as to whether or not, at no fault almost of his, whether or not Anthony Richardson truly understands how to absorb and take advantage of that because of the immaturity. And I don't mean immaturity like he's in the back of the bus, throwing spitballs. I just mean at Florida, and you can speak to this maybe a little bit, he never got the opportunity to be the guy long enough at Florida to understand everything that goes into being the guy.
Sure, I mean, and he was the best athlete on the field. All you had to do was show up, really. I mean, and he's going to outrun most everybody.
Was it that apparent in Gainesville?
It was that good. Like he was, because he's a freak. He's 6'5" and 240, whatever he is, 235, and can just absolutely fly past people. And then has occasions has an arm that can throw down the field. The consistency there is in question. Whatever. It was so when he ran out, it was like, okay, he's going to run, and then he would step back and throw one and surprise you, and then he'd run for an 80-yard touchdown later in the game. He was that good.
Did he have, you mentioned that in watching Trevor Lawrence, that you can see with Trevor Lawrence occasionally the throws where you say, yeah, that's it right there, right? Did Richardson show that at Florida?
The games I did, not necessarily. I mean, they did. They played like USF, South Florida, and he comes in. It was like a mid-game change. Emory Jones was the other quarterback. Comes off the field. Here comes Richardson, who would run for 170 last week. First play, pulls it out, wide open guy, right? Just toss it up there. It wasn't like threading the needle through windows. In the times that I saw it, can it develop? I don't know. I don't know if you can. If you don't have that, you're not going to really just fall into that, are you?
Emory Jones sounds like the college that usually Florida plays in Week 9.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that right? Alabama. Alabama plays Emory Jones just before Thanksgiving, right?
And he had a couple touchdowns in that game, too. They pummeled South Florida. But we'll see. What are the other options if it's not Richardson?
Well, that's the question, right? And Joe Flacco obviously was here. Stephen Holder is going to join me in the 2 o'clock hour, and he and I talked about this a little bit ago, and I think we'll get back into it. Probably ideally maybe a Justin Fields, because Chris Ballard, and you tell me if Jacksonville's had this. Chris Ballard has talked about the fact that where he erred was a year ago. He didn't bring in enough players to push the roster, and too many guys were comfortable because hey, I'm good. I'm the starter here, and that's that. Yeah. And that probably includes the quarterback position because at no point did anybody think they were going to hand it over to 57-year-old Joe Flacco, right?
Right.
Justin Fields comes in and plays a similar type style. So if you have to take him out, you could maybe put Fields in and you're running similar sets, but he might push Richardson a little bit. Now the question becomes whether a Fields wants to come here. But then outside of that, what are your options? Andy Dalton? That's kind of
a totally
Flacco
different
2.0,
feel
right?
on offense, right? Yeah, it's not even the same. It's two different offenses.
They may look here round 5, round 6, maybe. I don't know.
If you're relying on a 5th or 6th round guy to come in and play, that's a problem,
right?
For everybody involved.
Well, JP, and you can use this line at Jaguars.com if you want. Okay.
Okay.
I've always said, backup quarterbacks are donut tires. They're perfectly sufficient to get you to a next exit, but if you're going to try to complete your entire journey on one, you're going to find out why it's a spare.
Excellent analogy.
Thank you.
Honestly, you need that guy for like 2 weeks.
That's exactly right. If you're using it for more than that, you're in trouble, right?
Big trouble.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with the Jaguars with Mac Jones.
So now when do you leave?
We're out of here on Friday. Glad you asked.
Have you been to St. Elmo yet?
I have once. I'll probably go again.
Really?
Yeah, why not?
We have other restaurants here. I love Elmo.
I'm aware.
I love it.
Well,
I
had the shrimp and I had a salad. I didn't have a steak.
Okay.
And this is
Lots of
blasphemous to say, but there are some other steakhouses in town.
Now, when you go, you see other guys? Do you just say like, "Hey, you good? You good? All right,
What's up, man?
good."
Oh, hey, what'd you order? Oh, yeah, I had the shrimp cocktail.
And you say what to end the conversation?
Okay, that's it. I'm saying, well, when are you out of here? On Friday. Okay.
All right. Well, you're out of here on Friday. We'll be back tomorrow. You're welcome to come by again.
Can't wait.
And then we will definitely talk to you next year as well, right? Matter of fact, well before then, I know. But JP Shadrack, Jaguars.com, where you can read his work. Always good seeing you,
Always
man.
a
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you.
Stephen Holder will be here and join us coming up 2 o'clock hour from the Combine at the Convention Center on the Fan. Indiana Convention Center, I believe it's Hall J. As a matter of fact, it must be because I just looked up and there's a huge J on the wall. My deductive reasoning skills are strong.
Are you sure that's not a
NFL
J for
Combine.
Josh?
It's for the Josh table. Jacksonville Josh, my new name. Indeed. That guy was so excited, man. I just didn't have the heart to tell him. Like, look, I don't know who Josh is, but it ain't me. He was super excited to see me, which does not happen often. To lay out for you where we are, if you've ever been to the convention center, I think most people have, in one of the big expo halls here. Expo Hall J is where we are, and literally, if you just put a big stripe right down the middle of it with curtains, the left side of those curtains is the radio row, and that's where we are. There are some 55 tables set up. The vast majority of them are different franchises that have their media people representative here, and then some radio stations as well. We happen to be our neighbors today. In the past, we were near the Raiders fellas. Now, when I did the morning show, the Raiders guys were great because they would show up well after the morning show was over with and clearly had been out to Tiki Bob's and Taps and Dolls and whatever else. We have to our left the Chicago Bears. It's not the Bears. It's a television station from Chicago. The Jets are a couple of tables over. It looks like there might be Vikings representation next to us, and then two guys from Cleveland. And the two guys from Cleveland predominantly have been just talking about they don't really understand what's going on, which is not overly surprising. You know what I mean? That seems to be fairly par for the course. But you do see a lot of different people. Ryan Grigson I just saw walking past, by the way. He is now with the Minnesota Vikings. But it is fun to be here. The other side of the curtain is if you see the interviews that take place with athletes and players, when you're watching the television shows after the fact, that is where C.J. Stroud, for example, the year when he said, I'm a ball placement specialist, that was the comment that really came out the year that he was going into the draft. And this year, it is interesting because you don't get necessarily the can't miss, everybody knows it's going to be the number one pick guy. Certainly, Hunter from Colorado, the Heisman Trophy winner, is probably the best athlete in the draft. I think Abdul Carter, the defensive end out of Penn State, a lot of people believe that he may be moving his way up into the conversation for number one overall. Shadir Sanders, Deion Sanders' son from Colorado, going to be in that mix as well. But we'll see those conversations take place just on the other side of where we are. Stephen Holder going to join us coming up in just a little bit. But let's talk about what happened last night at the Fieldhouse. Pacers on the short end against the Denver Nuggets. Pretty simple game to explain. Number one, I thought, and we were concerned is probably the wrong word. I think curious is a better way of saying it. We were curious about what was going to happen for Indiana, just in the fact that it was a back-to-back, and you played 2 nights in 2 games, and so that aspect of it, you wondered what was going to happen from a fatigue standpoint or just an overall endurance standpoint. And the Nuggets were coming off of 9 straight wins. Then they were kind of embarrassed by the Lakers. Then come into Indy, but had some rest. And in that capacity, they definitely look rested. Now, a big part of that is Nikola Jokic, who his vision and the way that he sees the floor and facilitates for Denver, it's interesting because it's like watching him run down the floor. It seems labored. It seems drawn out. But as you're watching him, you don't realize the impact that he's having until you look up statistically and you think, holy cow, this guy now has 15 assists, 10 rebounds. And just his vision in general and his ability to move the ball around and find people at the exact spot was truly, I hate to say a joy to watch, but it was. I mean, it is unique in today's NBA. But Indiana the Pacers were able to stick around largely due to the, I think, offensive aggressiveness of Tyrese Halliburton. And, whenever Halliburton is trying to get his shot, it's a good thing. And he had it last night. Then they had opportunistic scoring from Aaron Nesmith, who had a couple of big shots. Siakam, you know what you're going to get there. But, Eddie, you pointed this out. Late in the game, what did you observe, Eddie, as you were producing it for the Pacers Radio Network? And by the way, Chris Denari last night, not on the broadcast, Pat Boylan capably filling in. I think Chris will be back soon. But, Eddie, as you were noticing as Indiana got it down into the 3 to 7 point hump that they couldn't get over in the second half. What did you observe that Denver did that you thought was the difference that enabled the Nuggets to close it out?
It's something that I noticed in the postseason last year. When you get into the crunch time of games when they're close, you start to try to identify who the opposing team's weakest defender is and exploit them. And that is all the Denver Nuggets did, primarily in the final 5-6 minutes of that game last night, is they went right after Tyrese Halliburton and whomever he was guarding. They went to Christian Brown. 3 of the 4 straight possessions. I think there was an Aaron Gordon dunk in there somewhere as well. And they just religiously went after Tyrese because they know he's the weakest defender on this Pacers team. And if Indiana has aspirations of making it into the postseason, another deep run, then they're going to have to figure out ways to either disguise or hide Tyrese, because when the time comes, when every possession matters, you can't have a guy out there that's just giving up baskets left and right at the rim.
And the other thing they did with Christian Brown, for example, and again, that goes back to having Jokic there as the facilitator up top, because there are 2 advantages for Jokic that Indiana really had trouble with last night, and I'd love to see this, and I think they do this with Miles Turner. But when you bring him up, and Jokic is essentially running a point center position, he's got the ball at the top of the key, and he's getting the ball really with his back to the basket. He's coming up to basically set a screen on a pick and roll, and he can either turn and pop, or then he just stands and he's waiting for somebody to cut in beneath him and his ability to turn and see that cut even before it happens. I mean, there's a timing that comes into that as well. But the touch with which he could either on a zip pass or kind of a lob pass into a cutting Brown. They did that, I think, 2 or 3 times in a row, Eddie, with Brown. And so what you're doing in doing that is now you're forcing Halliburton almost to come in behind him. I mean, Halliburton was falling behind in that, and Brown was getting very open looks. And you're right, they did that repeatedly. And Brown was fresh, right, because he had not played for a lot of the game. Then all of a sudden, boom, you put him in that situation, and it helps. Denver isn't overly deep in the fact that it's not like there's a lot of play. I think Indiana's probably the deeper team, truth be told. But they were fresher. The Pacers had at one point 3 straight opportunities to hit threes, and they just couldn't get them to go down. Nesmith missed one. Halliburton missed one. I think Nesmith might have missed 2 of them. Shepard might have missed one. Just one of those games where they couldn't get over that hump. They could not get over the 3-point hump, and it is what it is, right? But now you bounce back tomorrow night, Toronto at the Fieldhouse for the Pacers, and hopefully get a little rest too, because it has been, Eddie, it's been a stretch here. What is this, 3 games in 5 days, something like that?
Yeah, something like that, yeah, because you had the back-to-back, obviously, and then 2 days were off between Clippers and who was the other game? I can't remember now, the game between Clippers and Nuggets. What was that game?
You had the Clippers on, it was just that, right? The Clippers were Sunday, right? And then the Nuggets last night, right? In the back-to-back?
Yeah, my mind is just going all over the place.
You've been running the board too long, right?
I know. All these games just run together, and you forget who they played and when they played.
Here's the other story that has taken place and developed here in the last – Memphis. I forgot about Memphis, which was a good win for them, obviously. The other story that is an interesting one to keep an eye on in Indianapolis that I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to go back to it. At the Pacer game last night, you had your usual – I was there. John was there, so J&B was there, myself. We saw Clayton Anderson there. My buddy Michael Weir was with me. And it was a great night at the Fieldhouse for sure, and it was fun. And I did not realize that the following 2 people were there, but they were. The mayor of Indianapolis was there along with, and it was his guest that was the more interesting aspect of it, the commissioner of the MLS, Major League Soccer. And this is another step towards, and I would anticipate, what I'm about to say is conjecture, strictly me reading tea leaves and assuming. So, yes, there's a danger in assumption.
Hold on,
but
Jake.
I think it's...
You're reading tea leaves. That means you've got the tinfoiled hat on.
That's right. Thank you. I would assume that because they were inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse and had proximity then to people involved with Gainbridge Fieldhouse, that conversations continued and escalated in regards to the MLS coming as an expansion, and I would assume it's expansion and not relocation franchise, and what this means for Indianapolis and its involvement. Now, what we know is this. What we know is that Joe Hogsett, the mayor of Indianapolis, had come out within the last year or so to say that he believed he had an investment group that was interested in getting involved, civically speaking, from a business standpoint, with bringing soccer professionally at the MLS level to the city of Indianapolis. And that at that time, the city announced that they were going to branch away from and develop this project independently of the MLS aspirations of the Indy 11 and the Indy 11's desire to build a soccer complex and stadium. So let's go back to when the Indy 11 and their quest for a stadium. And there's a reason why this history lesson is pertinent. When the Indy 11 first came into play in Indianapolis and first were in the discussion of, coming into soccer in Indianapolis before they had ever played a game, they immediately announced their decision for it, and at the time I believe it was an $85 million stadium was their goal. Now, they obviously are owned by Ursel Özdemir, a very successful businessman in town, who is the owner, or at that time was the primary owner of Keystone Realty, I believe is the name of the group, which is a large building development and construction firm. And they did, and kudos to the Indy 11 on this. I had season tickets the first year. They played at Michael Carroll Stadium. They did all the proper things to build a fan base and a partnership within the community in many, many areas. But there was no secret about the fact, from their standpoint or from just being around it, there was no question about their desire to someday build a stadium and to build a soccer-centric stadium, not to play at Lucas Oil Stadium, even though we, the people of Indianapolis as taxpayers, had been told at the time of the building of Lucas Oil Stadium, the most highly publicly subsidized sports venue in the United States at the time, that it was going to be a one-size-fits-all cure-all for all future sports needs in the city of Indianapolis. And they did eventually move into Lucas Oil Stadium, but decided the dimensions were not good enough. And I don't mean that condescendingly. The dimensions did not meet what they needed to play, so they went back to Michael Carroll Stadium. Then the Indy 11 announced their desires to build Indy 11 Park in the Diamond Chain location just to the west of downtown Indianapolis. The problem with that is also the site of the Green Lawn Cemetery, which was a large cemetery for minorities primarily in the early 20th century. And there are provisions that when you are developing and building and you come up with human remains that you have to stop, and you can't just toss them aside and keep building. And that became an issue in the building of that area. I don't know where things stand in terms of the development of Indy 11 Park. It seems as though that has gone completely on hold. As a matter of fact, there was an article this morning in the Indianapolis Star about that land now being used as an opportunity for young people to historically be able to work with some of and uncover some of the remains there, morbid as that may sound, which would lead you to believe that the Indy 11 Park project is done. Now, the reason that is all significant is because the city had basically told the 11 that they are moving on from that with their own independent venture towards getting an MLS team here. And that involved the development of land just to the east of Gainbridge Fieldhouse that includes the area that is now the old heliport. And it is believed that the investment group for that was acquired by the city of Indianapolis is one that was facilitated but not directly involved by Herb Simon, the owner of the Pacers. So for last night, the commissioner of MLS to be at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, one would assume that is another step towards, including the governor of Indiana today, Mike Braun, saying that he is open to the possibility and the exploration of the MLS team. That would lead me to believe not only that we are closer to that reality, not saying that it's on the doorstep, but that we are closer to it. But certainly it seems to be not only another step towards the MLS, but another step heading in the direction away from the Indy 11. That's where things stand as of right now, which are certainly interesting. Joining us back again, Stephen Holder, who I can't remember, were you on the air with us earlier, Stephen, or just hanging out with us? I can't recall. My hours are all running together.
I think I was just hanging out. So It was off the clock.
Okay.
This is on the clock.
That's right.
And let me tell you, my hourly rate is pretty high, so I'm
aware.
surprised you guys are on board.
Believe me, the boss has let me know. Stephen Holder of ESPN.com, who you hear on this program and on this radio station with frequency, joins us here at the Combine. Get me up to speed in terms of, you have obviously been here since the beginning of the day. We have heard from a number of different people. We don't hear from yet the Colts players until and when I say players, I mean executives, Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard later today. But the overall, I guess, mood storyline, if you will, of this Combine.
Yeah, I think the Combine is where teams start to well, let me rephrase this, where we start to get the first vibes of what these teams think about the draft. And so a couple things in terms of strengths that have stuck out from comments I've heard so far from some executives and coaches, and offensive line is one.
As a strength, you mean?
As a strength,
okay.
Correct. Offensive line, interior defensive lines, so defensive tackles, they're excited about them. Running backs, which is interesting, right? Because
we got away from that a couple years ago, right?
We did. There's been some conversation about that today. Is that now seen as acceptable? I would say yes. I mean, not that you couldn't do it, but teams weren't doing it for whatever reason, and it is a copycat league, and teams do tend to follow patterns and trends, and so we have, though, in the last couple of years, we've seen the return of some of these veteran running backs. Look at the year Derrick Henry had, Saquon Barkley, et cetera. And then we've seen some young running backs come into the league and immediately take off and help some really good teams, including some playoff teams. So that is now something that's back on people's radars. It is funny how it is. It's basically high school. It's like we do what our friends are doing, right? It's basically that. We think these guys are so smart, but maybe they're not. I don't know.
Stephen, JP Shadrick was here from the Jaguars, Jaguars.com, a little bit ago, and he and I were talking about this.
Yep.
One of the things I think that's challenging for all the teams in the AFC South, notably for probably Houston the most challenging, I do think that you sometimes defensively tried to build against what you anticipate you're going to see within your division. But if you are, say, Houston, you've got three teams in the division that you don't really know who their long-term quarterbacks are. So do you know what kind of a defense that you want to build, or do you just build it generically and say, you know what, one thing that we do know is, as we saw in Philadelphia, you've got a nasty front four you can contend?
No, I do think that is an approach that teams take, for sure. Not every team, but some. They mold their team or model their team around who they're going to play most often. It makes sense, don't get me wrong. But I also would say in the case of the Texans, for example, I mean, they've been out in front in this division for the last several years, right? Shouldn't they be modeling their team to go beat Kansas City? Shouldn't they be modeling their team to go beat Buffalo? I mean, and I'm not saying they're not. I think they actually were. If you look at how they approached last offseason, they went out there and they got star power. It didn't work necessarily, and I'm not judging the results. I'm judging the intent, okay? And their intent, I thought very clearly, was to say, we're going to go out there and we want to go out there and compete for the conference, not the division. And it turned out they held on to the division for dear life. Injuries were a factor. The offensive line really let the quarterback down, et cetera. Lots of factors, right? But I think the mentality was right. Maybe they jumped the gun a little bit. I don't know. But I actually don't mind that's where their heads were at. Their heads weren't like, man, I hope we beat the Colts. Man, I hope we beat the Jaguars. They were like, no, we're coming for Kansas City and Buffalo. And, they were right to have that opinion. They were the best team in the division, even so.
When you look at the Colts in general, have they fallen? I had this conversation earlier, and it's a tough place to be. But, Stephen, are the Colts just kind of stuck in that mid-tier purgatory where, you know what I mean?
Yes, they are. It's not a bad thing, but it's a reality we have to acknowledge because take Tennessee, for example, right now. They have had high picks in recent years and have struck out on those. So I'm not patting them on the back, okay, because where are they at? They're picking number one again, right? However, if you get this pick right, let's say I have no idea what happens, but let's just say, for example, say they pick Cam Ward, or say the Giants trade up and take Cam Ward at quarterback. I don't know if he's the guy, right? But this is just for argument's sake. if you get that right, it changes everything, right? And the hope is you're never back there again, right? The Colts, and this is the blessing and curse of Chris Ballard. He drafts really well. I always say that, and people look at me like, he's an idiot. No, he drafts well. That's why they can win 8 games a year, 9 games a year. But that doesn't get you anywhere in the grand scheme, right? So he drafts just well enough to pick 16th every year. Now, you can bridge the gaps, okay? And maybe they'll do that this year. They're talking kind of like they're going to do it. You can go out there and you can sign players. It's totally legal to go out there and sign free agents, as opposed to sitting on your hands and saying, well, we like our guys and we'll just run it back. But their in-house talent is good enough to win 8 or 9 games.
Do you believe that this year that there are 2 quarterbacks that are going to go in the top 5, hypothetically, because there are 2 quarterbacks that merit going in the top 5, or because there are 2 franchises drafting in the top 5 that need a quarterback and so they have no choice but to take one?
So, I do think that – I think there's a big difference between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur is a good college quarterback, a very good college quarterback, I think. In fact, I would say that my opinion of him, because my opinion matters a lot, as
That's
you know.
Right, of course.
As you know. I mean, people in this building come to me to double-check their own opinions.
That's right.
So anyway, my very important opinion of him this year was that he made a big leap from last year. I thought that he executed better. He led his team better. He was more of a playmaker. What I would say, though, and someone said this to me earlier and summarized it well, someone in the New York market, and, of course, the Giants are interested in Cam Ward and quarterbacks, et cetera. This person in the media described it well, I thought. He said, I don't think he's special. And I said, I think I agree with that. Cam Ward can be special, potentially, and just because of his mobility and he has special plays. Shedeur Sanders, he plays well from the pocket. He's accurate. He does the things that you need a quarterback to do. That can win.
Is he the same player, Shedeur Sanders, we're talking about, out of Colorado?
Yeah.
Is he the same player if he has the exact same the exact same resume, the exact same statistics, the exact same plays on tape, and his name is Shedeur Holder, and his dad is Stephen Holder, the writer, as opposed to Deion Sanders?
He would have no athletic traits, but go ahead. Continue.
But you get my point,
Yes,
though.
I do.
How much of it is because you fall in love with what his dad was and you don't want to miss out on that possibility?
Well, and I would add to that, there's the entire Sanders approach, I guess. It's a show, right? I mean, it's a real-life reality show, except you don't have to turn on, Lifetime.
Sports Kardashian, right?
Yeah, they are. You just turn the game on, and it's a reality show, right? They're followed around by cameras everywhere they go. There are rappers on the sideline. It's a phenomenon, right? Would we be talking about Shedeur Sanders as much or at the same level if those things were absent? Probably not. Probably not. It doesn't mean that he's not worthy of being a first-round pick. I'm not saying that. But is he in the conversation for the number 1 overall pick? I don't know that that's the case. I do think that I think he's a first-round level quarterback in a draft that's absent of top talent.
I mean, there are years in any draft that you are blessed to be taking the number 1 pick.
Right.
And then there are years that you look at it and you say, oh, my gosh, like for my franchise that of all the years to be taken. The Colts, for example, had a year where they had the first and second. Can you imagine in today's day, can you imagine in 2025 at the Combine if it were this level and the Colts were taking the first and second pick in the draft?
It's crazy.
And in that year that they did it, they ended up with Steve Entman and Quentin Coriat, okay, who, both of them had moments. Entman just could not stay healthy, but both of them had moments. But when you look back on it, you think of, good Lord, of the terrible fortune of years to have not the first, but the first and second picks in the draft, and there was no slam dunk, game-changing, franchise-changing player. It feels like Tennessee has to feel that way right now, right?
Right. I mean, that draft you're referencing, I mean, that should have been something that changed the trajectory of the entire franchise. You would think, right? On paper, that's what that should have been. I would say Tennessee there's probably a little bit of that. Yeah. Look, they do have a very big need at quarterback, but when you make that pick, then you become where the Colts are, right? Which is you're tied to that player for 3-4 years, and you got to make it work, or you have to decide that it's not working.
Could they possibly go another year with Will Levis?
It doesn't appear that they are.
They've seen
that.
enough.
I have.
Do you think it's the mayonnaise stuff? I think it's the mayonnaise stuff.
Well, I mean, what a detestable person, right? I mean,
of course.
I mean, if that's the starting point, what are we talking about?
That should be the first question you ask somebody. Do you eat mayonnaise?
And the
yes,
second question,
you're out.
The second question should be, are you a psychopath?
Correct.
Well, actually, no, we don't have to ask.
That's redundant. Yes, correct.
Right. So he's a psychopath, and I don't want a psychopath as my quarterback. So I think we've settled this issue.
I'll tell you right now. If we went out to dinner and Shannon ordered mayonnaise on something, I'm entering the transfer portal.
Okay.
So I understand.
You're going to create a dating app?
That's correct. The No Mayo app. I understand why Tennessee would be moving on. All right, we'll continue the conversation with Stephen Holder as we are at the Combine. J&V is up next. I know that much because he just got here, but he's got a ways to go until then. But he is going to have, by the way, the new defensive coordinator of the Colts going to be on this radio station, 5 o'clock hour with John. As we roll along here on a Tuesday on The Fan. that is Luke Bryan that you hear playing. He is going to be at Ruoff coming up on August the 28th. And Eddie Garrison, the Ticket Fairy, has tickets to give away. And I'm going to go with, we'll let Stephen Holder pick the number. Stephen, give me a number 1 through 6 if you could.
So, hey, I'm just walking in here because I'm late from the break because I ran into an old friend who I'll tell you about in a second. What are we doing? Picking a number between what?
1 and 6.
4.
Number 4. If you're caller number 4 at 239-1070, that's 239-1070 to friends and family, then you are on your way August 28th to see Luke Bryan. We have tickets later to give away for Dropkick Murphys and Bad Religion, but for right now, Luke Bryan, August 28th, Ruoff Music Center. Caller number 4, you are on your way. Stephen, you said you ran into an old friend?
Yeah.
By that you mean a friend that you've had for a long time or a friend who happens to be old?
Well, he's older than the last time I saw him. In fact, he's a friend of all of our listeners, or at least they have made his acquaintance. Ryan Grigson.
I just saw Ryan Grigson over here to the right?
Yeah. Ryan Grigson.
With the Vikings now, right?
Yeah, very high-ranking Minnesota Vikings assistant. In fact, doing quite well, to be honest. I will say this for him. Look, we went round and round, during our time here. But this surprises people sometimes when I say this. We got along great, I thought. Were there combative times? Yes, of course, because that's the nature of their relationship, right? I mean, when you lose, the stories are not going to be complimentary, right? And they're going to say bad things that you're going to take personally. However, that being said, we had a lot of dialogue over the years. I thought we got along pretty well. A lot of honesty, probably sometimes too much. But what I would say to his credit is that he did a good job since leaving here and going to really solid organizations where you can kind of rehab your image or your reputation a little bit, right? Because that's just how it is when you get fired.
He's
Seattle and then Minnesota.
Was Cleveland in there as well?
Cleveland was in there briefly, yes. That's
true. And then now
yes.
Minnesota. And he just interviewed, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember which franchise it was.
I thought he was on a couple teams' GM list. So he very much wants another shot. I don't think it's the worst idea in the world. I know most Colts fans would probably scoff at that. They're scarred, by a lot of what happened in that era. I get it. However, it's kind of like what I'd say about like another person I've covered in the past, Raheem Morris. I covered him as a young head coach. He was at 32 years old. He got the job in Tampa Bay. This came up today when he was addressing the media at the podium, and he talked about his screw-ups from his first time having the job at 32 years old. And he said, and he's looking right at me. He's like, I know you remember. And I was like, I actually do. You were pretty awful. But he actually was on to some things, and he was going down the right track in a lot of ways, but you don't know what you don't know, And I think that's a big part of it.
What do you think, like from a GM standpoint, et cetera, what do you think is the biggest learning curve? Is it dealing with players directly? Is it dealing with agents? Is it meshing personalities? Is it dealing with the media? What do you think was Ryan Grigson's area that he most would like to have back?
Well, part of it is, I think for him, I think if he had to do it again, one of the things that I think he might do is, as much as we get on Chris Ballard about taking the long view to an extreme degree, Ryan Grigson, you could say, was on the other end of the spectrum and was consistently short-term in his thinking. And I wonder, had he maybe taking a little bit of a longer and slower pace, if things, some of the decisions maybe that he regretted might have worked out differently, right? Like you probably don't trade for Trent Richardson if you're not thinking like that, right? You actually pause and say, hey, maybe we can find a running back on the scrap heap instead of doing that.
I will die on this hill. I am convinced. You ready for a Jake Query conspiracy?
Let's hear it.
Eddie, go ahead and play the tinfoil hat if you could for us here, Eddie. Here's my Jake Query conspiracy. So the Colts have Vic Ballard as their running back, right?
At that time?
Nice player.
Yeah, sure.
He had been a one-year productive player, I believe, out of Mississippi State.
2012 draft.
And he gets hurt. And Jim Irsay gets to Twitter and starts telling people, like, Griggs is wheeling and dealing. We're going to land a whopper, shock and awe, all of that, right? I will forever believe this. When Jim Irsay publicly basically tried to calm the fan base by letting them know that he had a general manager that was going to be able to take care of the situation at running back, okay, he took leverage away from Ryan Grigson. And as a result of that, I believe that the Cleveland Browns, in knowing that Trent Richardson was somebody that was not working out in Cleveland, they are the ones that initiated conversation with the Colts. And they reached out to the Colts to say, look, your GM is telling the entire world that you're going to go out and get a running back that's going to appease your fan base. So what better way to do it than a guy that was taken in the top 5 in the same draft as the quarterback that's playing for you right now? We have an offer for you can't refuse.
Well, they could have and should have. Unfortunately, they did not. So you're asking, what do I think of the
I
theory?
think Cleveland initiated and talked Ryan Grigson into that trade because Ryan Grigson felt he had no choice but to make a move because the owner had essentially forecasted to the fans that that's what was going to happen.
So, all right. So here's what I'd say. You remember the Vic Ballard part of that equation. There's another part of that equation, which was Ahmad Bradshaw. Do you remember that?
Yes.
He was here, and I remember this distinctly because it was like my third week on the job at the Indy Star, first year in Indianapolis, and we had a game out in San Francisco, if you might recall.
Oh, yeah. Richardson had a touchdown that game.
Well, I'm sorry. It was the week before that, I should say. The week before that. So Vic Ballard gets hurt, and then so Ahmad Bradshaw, you could have paired Ahmad Bradshaw with like some other running back. And
Jonathan Williams, remember?
Yeah, you probably could have made it work. But, they wanted this, sort of big-time run game to pair with Andrew Luck. And so they go out there to San Francisco. You're right. He scored the touchdown that week. In that game, Ahmad Bradshaw got hurt. So what happened is, I think he broke his foot. So what happened is you then had a situation where instead of Trent Richardson being in tandem with Ahmad Bradshaw, it then became he was the featured guy, which didn't work out well. But to your question about whether I thought the Browns initiated it, I mean, probably. I mean, I think he had made a couple of trades the year before as well. So he may have had he being Ryan Grigson may have had a little bit of a reputation for that. I don't know. He also came from Philadelphia. They've been aggressive in trading over the years, so maybe there's some lessons learned there. I don't know.
And Richardson, I think now that we can look back on it, Stephen, and this goes to show also that sometimes you don't know in the moment things that you don't know, right?
Sure.
In hindsight, I think we have, and maybe it was you that unearthed a lot of this, but I think we found out that that Trent Richardson was dealing with a lot more than beyond just football during that time that really made things difficult for him. The football aspect of it was hard enough to get traded like that, but I think in the time we thought he was just absolutely like a bust with no interest. And maybe there was more to it behind the scenes from a family and drama standpoint that we were unaware.
I do think that's true. He definitely was, for lack of a better word, the provider for a great many people in his family. There were undue stresses involved with that. The other thing, though, I do think there's something else that did him in, and I don't know whether there's a relationship between this and what you just laid out, but there also is this element, which is there was a lack of motivation there. And I remember talking to people in the Colts about it sort of after the fact, like when it had come to the end of the road and we realized this wasn't going to work. I remember hearing from people like, man, we just can't get this guy to just like do what it takes.
Right. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, but more than most guys I've ever seen, right? I mean, he never was in shape. He was never going to be the first guy there. Not that that's the end-all, be-all, but I'm saying maybe you should have made some more effort to be that guy because you had the reputation of a guy who wasn't doing those things. And so I just wonder if he'd have left it all out there, what could he have been? And if he were in a better situation where maybe he didn't have those distractions that you talked about, what could he have been? I don't know. Maybe people weren't wrong about him as a football player. Maybe they were wrong about him as someone doing what it takes to be a good football player.
Is the Ahmad Bradshaw, and by that I mean, is the player that in tandem is going to push Anthony Richardson, the backup quarterback that is going to push him and work alongside of him and get him to where he needs to be? Is that player right now somewhere on a free agency wire, or is that player sometime in the next 3 or 4 days going to talk to the media here at the Combine?
I would not rule out the draft. I think more than likely we're talking about a free agent or trade, what have you, so an existing veteran. I think more than likely. And here's why. And then I'll get to the draft. But I think largely because part of the thinking here is that, okay, this kid has an injury history, so this person might have to step in and be a starter for some length of time, right? So if that's part of your motivation, then you should be thinking in those terms. That being said, there is something to be said for looking at the draft, and I think I laid this out with you before. I know I laid it out with the morning show once, and I'll repeat it here. There's a little bit of a precedent here. Go back to 2019. Someone we know well, Carson Wentz, is the quarterback in Philadelphia. They go into the draft thinking about quarterback just generally, like we need a little depth at quarterback. And what do? They use their second-round pick to go get Jalen Hurts.
But that broke Carson Wentz, didn't it?
Well, yeah, but that says more about Carson Wentz than anything else.
Right. So is there a danger, though, in drafting a quarterback that pushes Richardson too far?
Yeah, maybe. But what I'd say is then maybe he's not your guy. You know, I think you got to find out. And the only way you're going to find out, I mean, look, if he can't handle that situation, then he certainly can't handle being the quarterback in a pressure-packed playoff game, right? Or whatever the future holds, you know. So he's got to demonstrate that he can handle adverse situations, tough situations, because that's what the job entails.
Okay, I want you to think about this, Stephen. I'll get your answer on the other side, and then we're going to give away tickets as well to Dropkick Murphys before we hand it off to John. I want you to think about this, Stephen. You're an NFL executive. You're on the airplane. You're flying to Indianapolis for the Combine. You're sitting down. You're buckling in. Your roommate sits down, and as you're buckling, they say, so you're heading to Indy? And you go, yeah. And they say, for what reason? You say, I'm going to the NFL Combine. And they say, oh, well, that's cool. And then you're thinking to yourself, please don't ask what franchise, please don't ask what franchise, please don't ask what franchise. And the reason why is because deep down, when you have to put on your gear and walk around downtown Indy, you're like, yeah, it's cool I'm in the NFL, but I'm a little embarrassed because my franchise is a total dumpster fire and everybody knows it. Which franchise are you, if you're working for what franchise, you want people to know you're in the NFL, but you don't want them to know that you're at the Combine because clearly you can't get it right. We'll get that answer and we'll give away tickets other side. is the band playing right now, and they are in concert on August 5th. Now, you can keep talking, Steven. You just got to lift the mic up there. Steven's in conversation with Jeff Ricker.
I'm in another world right
That's
now.
That's all right.
Yeah.
August 5th, Bad Religion along with Dropkick Murphys at Everwise Amphitheater. As I'd mentioned, there is nothing better in the summertime than a clear night, Everwise Amphitheater, or our friends at Ruoff also, but just live music in Indianapolis in the summer is awesome. And August 5th with Bad Religion and Dropkick Murphys, we have a pair of tickets to give away. Eddie is going to do that right now, and he is going to do so by doing caller number. Here's the deal. Colts are drafting 14th in the Combine. We don't have 14 phone lines, but there are two of us. You divide 14 by 2, you get 7. Caller 7, you are on your way August 5th to the Everwise Amphitheater to watch at White River on the lawn, Dropkick Murphys and Bad Religion. All right, Stephen Holder, so you are on the plane. You're on your way to Indianapolis. You work for an NFL team. You're sitting down, and somebody is super impressed that you work for an NFL team, and you are praying they don't ask you what franchise because it's an indictment on your job because your franchise is in total disarray. What are the 3 franchises that you most are like, please don't ask?
So I actually think – right now, one of them, this may change like a year or 2 from now, and maybe 5 years ago it wasn't the case. But I'd say right now, you got to put the Jets on that list.
I think the Jets are number 1, right?
Because,
they are right back to square one. I mean, what are they doing, right?
They're a late-night punchline. Like, they're the team you make fun of, like the late-night comics make fun of, right? So that's one for sure, just because of all the silliness that's happened with them. I mean, your quarterback's taking a darkness retreat, okay?
Okay, so which leads to this question. When you look at the status and the state of where the Jets are right now, does that cause some team to punt on the Aaron Rodgers experiment?
Yeah, it should. It should. Yes, it absolutely. You mean the next team?
Yes.
It should, absolutely. Well, no, listen. If you bring him in the door, you are handing over a large part of your fate and how you're going to be governed. You're handing it over to him because there's no other way, right? He doesn't concede anything.
Right.
He wants you to do it his way. He wants you to sign his guys. He wants you to run his offense, hire his coaches. Like, dude, how much – I mean, what are we talking about? Win some games.
Right. Totally.
So that's what we're talking about.
Okay,
here.
so Jets are one.
That's one.
Okay.
All right, and then I would say –
Now, one of them you got to say quietly because their table's right over here next to us. So don't say anything. Just be quiet. They don't need to know what we're talking about. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Continue.
Well, I would say Tennessee.
Okay.
I'd
but at least Tennessee people are going to talk to you about who you're going to take number 1 overall, possibly, right?
They're in a good shape right now at this moment just because of their situation. Jacksonville.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair.
I just because it's just tough, man. I mean, like, you know, they have the Urban Meyer situation. They've had this year, okay, their coaching search that just completed was a circus, okay? If you recall the details, I mean, there were other searches going on, so maybe it got lost in the shuffle. But you had a coach who was interviewing but didn't want to tell his former team in Tampa that he was interviewing.
Right.
Remember this? I
Yes.
mean, what a complete fiasco. And then it turns out he actually came back the next day and did want the job after all, as long as you fire the current GM who they were going to keep, right? So that's what we're talking about. That is a clown show.
Right.
Okay?
That's fair.
That is a clown show.
Okay, that's fair.
And not to mention, by the way, you know, you win one game every 3 years.
I mean, at least the Jaguars, like, yeah, it does kind of feel like I'm in the NFL, but it's the Jaguars or the Titans or any of those, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to say this quietly because their table's right over here. The Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, that is fair.
I mean, they're kind of – aren't they also in – and
fair.
I feel bad for them because they have a passionate fan base.
Yes.
And they did a good job. In all honesty, I think they've done a good job of putting together a pretty decent roster. But then the last piece of it is that quarterback position, which has just been
disaster? Is that the word you're looking for?
Beyond, right?
Yeah.
I mean, financially it has hurt them. They can't get it right.
Yeah.
And just when you I still don't know what the answer is there,
Well, I mean, they're going to have a change this year. They're going to go out there and make some kind of quarterback move. It could be a draft pick. They are picking what? Third,
could they re-sign Jameis?
Conceivably. I mean, I think you have to even think about the likes of Kirk Cousins. That's something that could be within the realm of possibility.
Could either of those names be possible here?
I don't think. Well, Jameis maybe. Kirk Cousins, I say no. The reason being is, Kirk Cousins is probably much more so looking for a place where he has an inside track to be the starter.
See, to me, Cousins and Winston both offer interesting predicaments for themselves. In the fact that at this point in their career, they are probably not good enough to be a starter that you feel like is going to get you there, but they're probably too good to be the backup.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. I think Cousins, just because of the money that he's commanded in recent years, he'll want big money. I don't know what his contract situation is. He might be able to be had cheap.
But he got a big deal in Atlanta,
That's what
right?
I'm saying. I think there's going to be money still due to him. So you could probably get him cheap. So that maybe levels the playing field a little bit for teams that are interested in him. Because if you have to commit – the reason I say this is if you have to commit $30 million to Kirk Cousins, you're not doing that.
Right.
Right? But you might say, okay, 7 or 8 because you're going to get $25 million from the other guys.
How great would it be to be Kirk Cousins? Let's go. Right?
Like, all you got to do is roll out of bed and get like $50 million.
Here I am, right?
I mean,
I'd be perfectly content wearing the Jaguars gear if they're paying me $50 million. Let's go. Titans, whatever it might be. Stephen, appreciate it. In terms of the rest of the day today, we know this much from a media availability standpoint. You've got coming up at 4:30, Chris Ballard will be speaking to the media, right? Then at 5:30, Shane Steichen. JMV will have Lou Anarumo, the new defensive coordinator for the Colts, will be joining us on the program here on his show coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. And then tomorrow, Shane Steichen will be with me at 2 o'clock, Chris Ballard on the morning show, 8 o'clock. So all things covered here. We got you covered from wall to wall on the Fan. John's up next. You probably heard him clapping. He's also shooting videos.
I won't be here tomorrow either.
John's not going to be here tomorrow? What's that? John won't be here tomorrow. So if you want to see JMV, you got to come out and see him today, I guess, right? All right, Stephen, appreciate it. We'll let you get to work because I know these guys are talking. John's up next. We appreciate you listening to Query & Company.